is Bloomberg Surveillance with Tom Keene and Paul Sweeney.
I'm sorry, it's a boom economy, and that's what we're adjusting to.
Neither party seems to want to take on deficits at all.
With Lisa Mateo on markets.
Stocks are coming off another record high.
And Michael Barr with news.
Tensions between the U.S. and China have heated up even more.
The best in economics, finance, investment, and international relations. This is Bloomberg Surveillance on Bloomberg Radio.
Good morning, everyone. Tom Keene, Paul Sweeney, Michael Barr, Lisa Mateo, all back together.
Yeah.
I got a little misty-eyed there.
Exactly.
Barr came in from Detroit, helping out the Detroit Lions get it done. We say good morning to you. There's so much world news going on, and frankly, news in Washington. We're going to get to that. Roz Matheson in studio. We'll speak to her in a moment. Really focus on France because she demands that. But we could have her on for like 3 hours, Paul. There's that much going on.
There's that much going on. South Korea woke up yesterday. What are they doing? Martial what?
I'm reading
crazy.
in is when you
we
don't
were reading
know
in real
anything.
time yesterday.
I'm reading in, the commitment we've had to Seoul, Korea, as Bloomberg News for years, is really paying off in our coverage there. We'll touch on that as well. What we're really going to talk about is this great bull market. It's my phrase, my theme to the end of the year. I walk in the door, folks, after Turks and Caicos, 13.10 on the VIX. Paul,
I know.
Should I buy my first share?
I think you might want to jump into this marketplace here, Tom. So we've got the futures looking higher again this morning. This Fed, we're going to hear from the Fed in a couple of weeks, and the expectations will get a little bit more easing. The economy is strong. Earnings were pretty solid. A lot of folks say you put that all together, and it's pretty constructive for risk assets looking into 2025.
On the bid right now, I'll just point out before Lisa, the NASDAQ up 0.7%. Good morning, Mark Benioff and Salesforce. From the Interactive Broker Studios, our Bloomberg Business Flash, Lisa Mateo.
And we've got futures advancing. This is after fresh record closing highs for the NASDAQ and the S&P 500. We'll start with S&P futures up 0.3%, 18 points. Dow futures 0.4%, 195 points. And NASDAQ futures, there you go, up 0.6%, 139 points. The 2-year yield 4.19%. That's up 1 basis point. The yield on the 10-year 4.25%, and that's up 2 basis points. Want to take a global look because we have a lot going on. Stocks in Asia, they're falling. This is after South Korea's president faces impeachment after declaring martial law. The Kospi index, it fell as much as 2% yesterday. Right now, it's down nearly 1.5%. The CAC in Paris, that's up about 0.4%. President Emmanuel Macron urging lawmakers to reject that no confidence vote that would topple the government. Voting set to start after 4 p.m. local time. That's 10 a.m. Wall Street time. Heading over to currencies, the Bloomberg Dollar Spot Index up about 0.1%. We had the Korean won up 0.8%. We have the euro down is weaker. It's down just a fraction. We have the British pound is stronger, just a fraction as well. Shares of Salesforce, Tom mentioned it, up 12%. Earnings beat thanks to demand for its AI products. Then more earnings coming out this morning. Fast and Furious. Foot Locker down 9%. Shoppers easing up before the holidays. And shares of discount retailer Dollar Tree, they're up 7%. Increased its sale outlook for the full year. That's following better than expected third quarter. That is your Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Paul.
Thanks so much, Lisa. Greatly appreciate it. Wei Li of BlackRock with us for an extended conversation here in about 4 minutes. We steal 4 minutes in studio with one of the treasures of Bloomberg. I'm going to cut to the chase. If you sit in Hong Kong in a coffee shop and you figure out Western journalism, at the time, the Wall Street Journal led the way. Roz Matheson owned Wall Street Journal coverage of the Pacific Rim in Singapore for years, joined Bloomberg a good decade ago, and we're thrilled she has the toughest job herding cats, our government coverage worldwide. Do you ever take a day off? You don't get to take it. I mean, on Sunday, you're worried about Dubai and Abu Dhabi, right?
It does seem the world's a bit on fire at the moment. And as you were saying, like yesterday, I have to say this was not on the bingo card.
No.
South Korea. There was a what on earth moment, I think, when we all saw the headlines. And then, retracted very quickly. A matter of hours later, he rescinds martial law. Parliament gets in there very quickly and says, no, what are you doing? Right. He's now likely to be impeached. He's likely to be out. It's like still thinking, what exactly happened here?
One question here before we get to France, and that is this leader of South Korea, so fragile, supports America, wants to be more strident against North Korea. Is that belief threatened within the turmoil of the government?
Oh, very much so. So you've got the opposition party leader, Lee Jae-myung, who's more cautious on all of those, including the US. He's talked
Right.
about having a more pragmatic economic relationship with China, for example. So for the US, it's been really important. You've got Japan, South Korea, and the US
Right.
all rowing together.
Okay, I'm going to cut to the chase. Are you going to Notre Dame December 7th? I mean, I saw the Gulf Stream. All of a sudden, the Gulf Stream is out.
Not available.
Roz Matheson, Notre Dame here with President-elect Trump?
Well, we'll see, of course. I mean, it's very interesting to have Donald Trump in France so soon, you know, given what's likely to happen today, which is possibly the collapse of the French government. I mean...
So where are we, Roz, on that? I mean, President Macron is out asking, I guess, the government, to just take your time here. Let's reset here. What do you think will happen today in France?
Well, it's interesting to see Emmanuel Macron surface at all because he's kind of been missing in all of this. I mean, he called an election 6 months ago and then didn't campaign. After the election result, he didn't surface for days. He's been very quiet as his government has been battling this fiscal, economic and political crisis at home. Now he's saying, please don't topple my government. But what you've got is the left and the right who really don't like each other with a common enemy, and the common enemy is Barnier and his budget.
Okay.
And they really just, you know, they're joining together and they're likely to see it through.
As an amateur, I explained there's 5 parties, 2 on the left, 2 on the right, Macron sort of kind of like in the middle. The conservative group, less Le Pen, less nationalist, less conservative, have they permanently broken from Macron?
To some extent. I mean, they weren't very happy about the way he handled the election. You know, and France is like many countries, it's gravitating in all sorts of different directions. Populist, but to the right. Spending, but to the right at the same time. You know, and so drawing the politicians and the parties that way, that's where the votes are.
Referee, my good friend John Fenby, with 3 or 4 books on France, as Roz Matheson knows. Let me ask the question I'd ask Jonathan Fenby. What would de Gaulle do?
Well, that is the question, is Macron really de Gaulle? But you know what, he seems to be willing to float above it all. So if Barnier goes, Macron has to find a new prime minister. Possibly, if that does, you know, that new prime minister is going to have to give the ground that Barnier didn't, which is, you know, for the markets, a massive concern. I mean, how do you escape having to make concessions for survival at this point, be it this government or the next one? And so you are setting up France, you know, for real issues around the budget going forward. And that's what markets are starting to worry about, the overcorrection that we're seeing happening.
Ross, can you give us a sense of just how important a stable France is politically for the greater European region?
Well, you put France and Germany together at the moment, and you've got a bit of a question, don't you? I mean, you've got Germany also going towards an election. And, you know, Germany can often go 6-9 months without a government after an election. Well, they argue about how they're going to form a government, which parties. And so France, Germany, massive European economies, all sorts of questions about European unity at the moment, not just necessarily with Donald Trump and an incoming US administration, which is going to be much more adversarial on trade, but also policy on Ukraine, policy on the Middle East, policy on China.
One last question. Wei Li sent me a note last night. She said, ask Roz Matheson about the Pacific Rim, Trump, and Euro-Australia. Okay, we've developed, like the Secretary of Defense within the Philippines, 4 bases. America's projecting again to the Pacific Rim. From where you sit with all your resources, Roz, is that under threat?
Well, possibly, because we just don't know where Donald Trump is going to sit on it. I mean, we had all that push under the Obama administration, the pivot into Asia that we saw. You know, Biden has really leaned in on that. So you've got the idea of the Quad, you know, which includes India. So all about pulling countries away from China's orbit. But is Trump going to be so willing to do that? He's more transactional. He's more about what does this individual deal do for the US and for me, less about overall strategy. So is he going to commit to that? I'd be a bit more skeptical.
Roz Matheson, thank you so much. I can't say enough, folks. The worst job in Bloomberg, 24/7, running our government coverage worldwide. It's extraordinary. Roz Matheson in studio from Queen Victoria Street in London. Joining us now for an extended conversation, like we should have her for 3 hours, is Wei Li of BlackRock. I don't know where to begin. So, Wei Li, let's start, since we're on the Pacific Rim, with Roz Matheson. You were acclaimed in your China for mathematics skills as a kid. You're a student of the Pacific Rim. I don't buy the idea of doom and gloom on China. there's a resiliency there. Do you detect a political, in an American phrase, come to Jesus, where they're going to be able to assert 5% growth?
As a mathematician, one number that jumped out to me just yesterday is 10-year yields in China just
under
dipped
2%.
to all-time low, below 2%. That is really remarkable. That speaks to markets not feeling confident about China exiting deflationary environment. That speaks to markets being quite worried about Japanification of China. So structurally, there are concerns around Chinese growth.
Is there an embedded deflationary vector right now? I mean, is it Clement Attlee 1930s Great Britain? Is it a deflation that we saw with Japan over the years?
Well, if we look at the consumers in China, they are still quite muted and really quite depressed. There has been effort to stimulate consumption, but that remains below trend coming out of the pandemic. And looking ahead, well, talking about an environment where exports could also come under pressure. So this is why we're less positive over the longer term around where China is heading towards. We're expecting 3% growth by the end of the decade,
growth?
which is quite a bit lower than
Wow.
5% for this year.
That's
and maybe they're looking at 5% for next year. We're not expecting that given the uncertainty around it. But in the very, very near term, valuation remains quite attractive. We have events coming up around the corner, the Central Economic Working Conference and the National People's Congress as well. So all of that could provide kind of near-term stimulus hopes, but really the longer-term story is really not that encouraging, I would say.
Is the government of China, to what extent are they concerned about really, I guess, isolating themselves from the rest of the world? Do they see that as a material risk? Because that seems to be how it's drifting.
I think geopolitical fragmentation has been happening, has been deepening, and is expected to continue going forward. So that's part of kind of China isolating or building spheres of influence around themselves, but it's also generally the spheres of influence between US and China moving further apart, which is why geopolitical fragmentation is a key megaforce that BlackRock has identified. That is inflationary, and that is why we are positioning our strategic portfolios for high for longer.
I want you to come back. Let's start with this question. When should kids start learning calculus? I mean, in America, it used to be you learned it at 22, and then it was 20. Now we got kids freshman year in high school having this, the product rule crammed down their throat. When should kids start learning calculus, Wei Li?
I honestly do not remember when I started learning calculus. Maybe in junior high school.
Junior high school, that's sick.
I was good in school.
Did you drop that in your interview with BlackRock that you took calculus in 7th grade?
But the point is, I don't use calculus these days in my day-to-day job. So what exactly is going to future-proof the future generation in terms of the things that they learn in school, right? As AI changes the nature of jobs.
Listen to her.
So
It's right in the AI chat. I give up. We're going to continue with Wei Li. We're going to look at this great bull market. There's no question about it, with futures up 18. Wei Li of BlackRock with us. Lots more coming up. We'll go to Paris and Caroline Conan here in the next hour, I believe it is. The turmoil in France, truly tangible this morning. Will the government make it to this evening? We'll have to see. We're on YouTube. Subscribe to YouTube at Bloomberg Podcast. Good morning.
markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio, I'm Lisa Mateo. We've got futures advancing. This is an investor's look to this week's key jobs data. Also remarks today from Chair Jay Powell for any clues on whether the Fed will cut rates in December. Now, the Fed's Mary Daly said a rate cut this month isn't certain, but remains on the table. We'll start with NASDAQ futures. They're leading the charge up about 0.6%, 134 points. Dow futures up about 0.4%, 213 points. S&P futures up 0.3%, or 19 points. The two-year yield, 4.8%. That's little change. The yield on the 10-year, 4.26%, and that's up about 3 basis points. To commodities, we have Brent crude at $73 a barrel, WTI crude at $69 a barrel. We have spot gold at $2,644 an ounce. To currencies, want to start with the Bloomberg Dollar Spot Index, up about 0.1%. Then we want to go to the Korean won. Right now, it's up about 0.8%. That's because of news surrounding South Korea's president. We go to the euro. The euro down about 0.1%. That's because of this no confidence vote taking place today. Over to earnings, more coming in. We have shares of Hormel Foods down 2%. That's after net sales forecast missed estimates. Then we have shares of Marvel Technology soaring up 13% after it delivered better than expected results and also that upbeat earnings forecast. For on-demand news 24 hours a day, subscribe to Bloomberg News Now, wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Lisa Mateo. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash. Paul and Tom.
Lisa Mateo, thanks so much. Paul Sweeney and Tom Keene with us. Wei Li of BlackRock to say she's global chief investment strategist, barely describes her duties. Look for her on LinkedIn. I think of Yuri and Timmer at Fidelity and Wei Li at BlackRock. Yep. Like, not just, hey, this is, what I had for lunch, but like really serious investment stuff. Here's the drill. I'm calling it the Great Bull Market, or this Great Bull Market we're in. There's off the December 18 low up 145% SPX. Off the October 22 low, up whatever it is, 40, 60%. The risk of extrapolation now is front and center. How do you handle the emotion that we want to extrapolate this good equity news with the reality of taking measured risk?
I think the big picture right now is not one of mean revert, it's one of transformation. We're talking about an environment where actually the key focus ought to be where the longer term trend is heading towards, rather than where the fluctuations are around what used to be a stable longer term trend. And that is also why we see 10-year yields being so much more sensitive to month-to-month data releases, because we're now in this almost unprecedented environment where longer term trend is actually shifting. That means mean revert does not quite apply when we're talking about transformation and moving targets. And that also means if we think something is expensive, they can get more expensive. If we think something is concentrated, they can get more concentrated if there are good reasons for that to continue.
How did you respond to what David Kostin did over at Goldman Sachs, modeling out, since we've come so far so fast, our central tendency is a low single-digit outcome? Heated complaints from the academic math community on how they went about that study. Are you that cautious on where the terminal value is of equity prices?
We actually took inspiration from that analysis to try to understand if the measure of concentration, which is to look at the market cap of the biggest company versus the 75th percentile, and look at that ratio, right? By that measure, U.S. equity market is close to the most concentrated in almost 100 years. And we try to understand, okay, that concentration, does it have significant bearing on subsequent market return over 12 months, over 10 years? The verdict of that analysis, inspired by the research piece of research that you are referring to, is that over the very near-term horizon, let's say investing for 2025, concentration doesn't have significant bearing. And over the longer term, in a mean revert environment, then it has significant bearing, but we're not in a mean revert environment. So we continue to think that earnings can come through for next year. We're looking at high single-digit return expectation, and there is reason in the context of U.S. exceptionalism for us to lean more into U.S. equities, which is what we're doing for this outlook.
Wait, Just
Did
been
she
about
just tell me I should buy my first share?
I think you should jump into this market. Both
Quick, let me
feet
get the
first, Tom.
out.
Jump in there, get your E-Trade.
You should keep your 100 shares.
Exactly.
2 or 3 shares of Apple.
Exactly. Wei Li, so it's been a month since the U.S. presidential election. We now know we have a Republican in the White House. We now have a pretty Republican-controlled Congress, although some very tightly controlled. Did that change the outlook for you folks at BlackRock? When you woke up from the election the next day, did you materially change your outlook on asset allocation, stocks, bonds, U.S., non-U.S.? Did it change your outlook?
I think in equities, America First policies would support U.S. At the expense of potentially global equities. We actually use UK equity allocation to fund the further upgrade of U.S. equities. This is what we did for this outlook. But in government bonds, actually the reverse is true, given the fiscal trajectory that we now expect from the Trump administration, but also specifically in the U.S. We think that there is room for term premium to come back even more in U.S. government bonds, which is why we prefer likes of gilts over U.S. long duration. So there is a different read across in risk assets and government bonds with the policies that we now expect. The last thing I would say, credit is an interesting one. Spread, U.S. IG spread is the tightest since the early 2000s, but that in part reflects number one, reasonably good fundamentals of credit and corporates, and number two, worsening indebtedness for U.S. government, right? So when we look at it from a whole income, total yield perspective, quality income is still a very interesting theme that we want to play.
Are you concerned about here in the United States continued deficits, continued growth in the debt? There doesn't seem to be any political will to address that at all, and it might just be don't worry about it. How do you guys think about that?
I would say two things. First, it is not a U.S.-specific phenomenon.
Okay.
I think what's happening in France really shows that this is really across the board. A higher indebtedness is really a phenomenon across the board. Number two, we are risk-on for now. We're dialing up risk-taking, but rate repricing is a key signpost that we're monitoring as we look to dynamically dial up and dial down risk-taking through the course of 2025. So that's definitely something that we pay a lot of attention to related to tariffs announcement as well, because higher tariffs, higher inflation, higher rate expectations. So all of that is really under risk monitor as we keep risk-on for now.
One final question. You were sitting in your classes, I believe at Cambridge, and you ran through productivity. The great missed call this year has been American economic growth, resilient nominal GDP. Everybody got the growthiness wrong. What portion of productivity is the why we're achieving right now?
I think U.S. Growth has been very resilient because this is not your typical cycle. I think there are some false alarms, especially during summer, looking at the sign rule, the typical recession signal not working because we are in this environment of transformation rather than standard cycle, right? There are multiple disconnects that point to this is not your typical business cycle. We're looking at an environment where the Fed is cutting rates when financial conditions are very, very easy. Those traditional recession signals not working. So all of that means that we cannot use the old playbook to understand where economy is, but also to kind of think about asset allocation mean revert.
So at the margin, can you buy Mag 7? If we're not mean reverting, and if we're going to a new Wei Li terminal value, can you add to Mag 7 this morning?
Mag 7 multiple is 30 times, and at the beginning of 2022, it was 35 times. At the inception of ChatGPT, late 2022, it was 25 times. So it is expensive, but it's not extremely expensive. There are good reasons, earnings momentum that supports those valuations. You know, like mean revert. If we're talking about an index that has become more growthy in nature over time, then the mean needs to reflect the more growthy nature of the benchmark. So we continue to like Mag 7, but we have broadened out how we play the AI theme because we expect that to have broader read across the whole economy. So public market, private market, we are building the transformation, we are financing the transformation.
I'm building a transformation to our break worldwide. Wei Li, thank you so much. With BlackRock. We're on YouTube on your morning commute. across America, Bloomberg Surveillance.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio, I'm Lisa Mateo. Well, not much movement in stocks yesterday, but it was just enough for the NASDAQ S&P 500 to notch record closing highs this morning. We're seeing a little bit more action. NASDAQ futures up 0.6%, 136 points. Dow futures up 0.4%, 186 points. S&P futures up about 0.2%, or 17 points. We have the two-year yield, 4.19%. That's down, up 1 basis point. The yield on the 10-year, 4.26%, and that's up 3 basis points. To currencies, the Bloomberg dollar spot index up about 0.1%. We have the Korean won up about 0.8%. The euro down about 0.1%. We have Bitcoin down about 0.1% too, at around 95,000. Few companies making news. Microchip Technology pausing its application for U.S. semiconductor subsidies. The company was actually in line for $162 million in grants from the CHIPS and Science Act. And Wells Fargo looking to sell its headquarters building in San Francisco. It's moving to a new location. It's less than a half a mile away, but it has more modern workspaces, updated technology, and improved amenities. And finally, ending off with earnings, Yvette Bell and Kennel Fee are listening. Shares of Chewy down more than 7%. Third quarter net sales missed estimates. That is your Bloomberg Business Flash. Paul and Tom.
We went to the fresh food.
Yeah.
My brother got me on it. It's more expensive.
Of course.
But you wonder if it's affecting Chewy. I'm doing less work with the chew than I was before.
So you're going for like the real food in a refrigerator?
They mail it in a frozen container thing
like the
from
Hello
Nashville.
Fresh, like kind of stuff?
Yeah, it's like called Num Num or something.
No, okay.
And you know, we're like not happy, and then you feed it to the beast. Vet loved it. Vet's like, give me more. We're doing help me out on YouTube live chat on that, please. It's a long way from Gainsburgers, which fortunately, Gainsburgers are like Tang and Sanka. Nobody really remembers what they are. We have some news perfectly timed with our conversation with Roz Matheson and Wei Li of BlackRock. Paul, GM was like, in America, if you were Nixon and Kissinger, you wanted GM to invest in China.
Yeah, and now they're taking some pretty serious write-downs there, Tom. I think the global auto industry is, I can't imagine trying to invest in the global auto industry.
With Stellantis.
With Stellantis and all these companies, of Volkswagen, and just, they're all trying to deal with this transition to electric vehicles, and they have no idea where the market really is in terms of end user demand here. Yet it costs billions to invest in this EV business. And at the same time, you've got China companies just seemingly taking over the EV business globally. I don't know how you play it.
GM not hammered. It was 53, 54. It's down to 52-ish right now. These are non-cash charges. Yeah. So, it's not the end of the world. But I just think from an historic standpoint, folks, with President-elect Trump coming in, to see GM walking away from China is tangible. So we bring that to your attention. We'll do much more on that. That's just out right now. Rich, Cy, can you see if we can effort Matt Miller? It's 7:32. Matt will be waking up about 8:30. See if we can get Matt Miller in on GM as well. Right now to the fixed income space. Andres Skriba joins us now, head of Blue Bay U.S. fixed income. I'm really focused on equities with the VIX, 13.18. Andres, thank you so much for joining us this morning. Is yield forward clipping a coupon, or is there a total return opportunity?
Good morning, and thanks for having me on. Well, we're looking at current yields, and we do see some potential pressure on yields further down the maturity curve. We think the recent rally that you have seen has gone maybe a bit too far, and as the market starts to consider the fiscal needs to fund the deficit over the coming year, we could see pressure further down the curve. So 30-year treasuries could hit 5%, in our opinion, over the coming 12 months. So that would imply less than your current yield total return on a forward-looking basis. But a lot depends, particularly on the extent of the trade war that we will see unfold in 2025.
Andre, did your team at RBC Global Asset Management, did you change your view of fixed income once you saw the results of the election and how the U.S. government is shaping up over the next 4 years?
Look, from our perspective, we in the weeks preceding the election, we felt with polls running neck and neck that the likelihood of a Trump win is higher rather than lower because of the past underrepresentation of President Trump in official polling. So we were preparing for this outcome. And with that in mind, we felt that initially the market will focus on the equity story. And the equity story is lower taxes, less regulation. And that's definitely positive for markets. But as we move into 2025, some of the themes that are more pertinent to fixed income market will start to dominate. So questions about inflation, about tariffs, about what Fed can do in an environment where fiscal policy is loose and potentially higher tariffs put pressure on inflation.
Next step. So in a world of global fixed income here, where do you see the best opportunities, Andre? Is it in the U.S. or outside of the U.S.? Are we going credit? Are we not taking credit risk? Where do you see the best opportunities?
So to us, the right way to play fixed income right now is to focus on shorter duration assets, essentially taking advantage of the fact that we live in a world where yields are pretty high by historical standards. So sitting in cash, money markets, or short duration fixed income securities that are paying you, depending on the market, anywhere between 5-6%, is actually not a bad place to be until we gain that policy clarity early in 2025. So that is generally our recommendation to our clients. Book profits on credit valuations that have just gone too far in the recent rally. Enjoy the yield of the asset class that is dramatically higher than in the past. Yeah. And then once we have policy clarity in early 2025, once we know how aggressive this administration will pursue a trade war and what Fed can do in response, then decide whether it's worth moving further out the curve and taking advantage of potential rate cuts, or we live in a world where there are no rate cuts and you stay in a higher for longer and therefore stay in shorter duration, nice yield security.
Should we see a wave of issuance into year end and beginning January next year?
Well, December is normally pretty quiet. Yeah. And we think this is going to be no different this time around. However, January always brings an explosion of issuance. So whether you're looking at credit markets or whether you're looking at treasury markets, we do expect a very busy primary market. But to be honest, that has not stopped investors from gobbling up fixed income securities this year as they were positioning for the rate cuts that started happening in September. But we will see whether with Fed potentially taking pause early in 2025, whether the demand for all that issuance will be there.
Andre, I can sit here in a 2-year treasury and get 4.2%. Do I need to take credit risk? It seems like the best performance in the U.S. has been high yield and leverage loans.
That is true. And looking at the leverage finance space, we do like loans in a higher for longer environment. So if that is the scenario that will play out in 2025, we think there's strong value in selectively adding to your loan exposure within the portfolio. Having said that, we also agree that for vast majority of investors, getting paid, let's say 100 basis points above treasury rate, whether in the corporate credit market or whether in the securitized market in shorter maturity securities, is perfectly good as an investment strategy.
Because of breaking news, we got to leave it there. Andrei Skiba, RBC Global Markets, thank you so much. Greatly appreciate it this morning. Right now, Paul Sweeney and I tried to find a person with an electric vehicle that weighs 3.5 tons, 4.5 tons. Yep. Short list. Matthew Miller joins us now, surveillance EV correspondent as well. Okay, GM, 58,000 people. They were there. Nixon, they were sleeping at the Peace Hotel in Shanghai on their way to Beijing, and GM had the courage to go into China. Are they exiting?
No, they're not pulling out of China, and they actually still think that they can turn this business around without injecting more capital. They're just writing down the value of the business, which I think was valued at over $6 billion, maybe $6.5 billion. By about $2.5 billion, and then they're going to spend another $2.5 billion to shut down some factories.
Does an EV GM car, which you're expert on, compete with Chinese EV that costs half as much, and frankly, on a weight basis, on an engineering basis, weigh half as much as well?
Right. I mean, GM's vehicles are far bigger. They have much bigger batteries. So I've recently spent some time in the GMC Hummer electric vehicle, which is almost 10,000 pounds. I also
5 tons.
I also a couple weeks ago drove the new GMC Sierra pickup truck, which has a 200 kilowatt hour battery. So we're talking about a 400-mile range. It's much different than the BYD vehicles that cost $10,000 because they only have 100 or 150-mile range.
Say, Paul Jacobson, CFO GM, does he think on a unit basis he can return to profitability in GM with that weight differential?
He does. And because they have brands that are very popular in China that aren't here. Like Buick is a very popular brand for GM in China, and they also have a lot of success with Cadillac. They sell a ton of the CT5 sedans in China. It's been a successful product. So they compete in a much higher price level there than they do here.
Is China going to take over the global EV business?
Well,
because it seems like that
it's the threat, right, that Europe is worried about and that the U.S. is worried about as well. I'm speaking, for example, today to the CEO of Volvo Cars on my television program, Bloomberg Open Interest, every day from 9 to 11 a.m.
Get the hook out.
They produce cars here, but also in China and Sweden, obviously. It's just much cheaper to do business there. So you're going to pay more if you want cars built outside of China in the future.
So, I mean, if I'm Volkswagen, if I'm Ford, what is my EV strategy? Am I all in? Am I kind of in? You
can't afford to miss out on. Don't forget, China is the world's largest car market.
Yep.
It's larger than the U.S. in terms of how many cars. Right. We're talking about 20 million a year. So, and it's growing. So. You have to think differently, though, because they buy cars, for the most part, for far less money and hold them for far less time.
Okay, can I ask the most asked question I get, in my travels around as a D-class celebrity? This number 2 question I get is, why is Afterthought wearing Dior? Okay, that's a second question. The number 1 question I get is, can you have a beard like Matt Miller? Okay, what is the Miller beard clause that we have?
You know what? I think post-pandemic you can do it. And I saw you when you were broadcasting from home during the lockdown, Tom. You did, for a split second, have a great beard, and I thought it looked fantastic.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Oh, Peter from Connecticut emails in, says, over my dead body. Matthew Miller, thank you so much. Great. Please remind us again when your celebrityness is on. Is it 11 a.m., 9 a.m.?
We're having the Volvo car CEO on. We're having the CEO of Lamborghini on today.
Wow.
On Friday, I have the CEO of Ducati. Next week, we have the CEO of Ferrari. So
things that we can all afford.
Bloomberg Open Interest, we focus on CEOs and I focus on cars.
Please, Lamborghini. Wait, whoa, I forgot, folks. Failed. GM Cadillac, Formula One, can they compete as a new team?
I think this is going to be the most epic competition we have ever seen, because it's not just GM, Cadillac in Formula One. In 2026, Ford is also entering the room. So you're going to have these two dominant U.S. brands going head to head.
Who do you want to drive for
Formula
GM
One.
Cadillac? Steal him from Ferrari. Sir Lewis?
I know he's driving for Ferrari. So, hopefully they pick someone young and with the future, because it takes years to build up a winning team.
Right.
So they're going to need, I think, 3 or 4 or 5 years before they can start to really compete.
It's got to be Pierre Gasly.
Gasly
it's
is very
Gasly.
good. Yeah.
He's very good. He did really well in Qatar. Did you watch Qatar?
I did, insane. And I also had Pierre Gasly on my show, Bloomberg Open Interest, every weekday from 9 a.m. to 11 a.m.
Lisa, escort Mr. Miller to the door.
We've had enough.
We've had enough of Matt Miller. That's good. Do you think Paul the Beard? I think, you know.
I think so. No problem.
That'd be great.
Yeah. Be perfect in a French cafe.
Peter's my boss. He said he'll hold the door. Bloomberg Surveillance.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio, I'm Lisa Mateo. We have futures gaining. This is after the S&P 500 notched its 55th record close this year. We'll start with S&P futures, up 0.3%, 18 points. Dow futures up 0.4%, 179 points. Nasdaq futures up 0.6%, 141 points. The 2-year yield, 4.19%. That's up 1 basis point. The yield on the 10-year, 4.26%. That's up 3 basis points. We have Brent crude up about 0.2%, $73 a barrel. WTI crude, $70 a barrel. Over to currencies, the Bloomberg Dollar Spot Index up about 0.1%. The Korean won, have to point that out, that's up about 0.8%. That's because of the news surrounding South Korea's president. Then the euro, we have down just a fraction right now, and this is because of a no confidence vote. It's taking place today, 4 p.m. local time, so that's about 10 a.m. Wall Street time. Companies making news. We heard about General Motors, just talked about that. Now Mitsubishi, sources saying it lost more than $90 million in China. That's after uncovering suspected fraud by one of its copper traders. And it's the first head-to-head trial of 2 blockbuster weight loss drugs. Eli Lilly says its Zepbound outperformed rival Novo Nordisk Wegovy. Patients on Zepbound, well, they lost an average of 20% of their body weight compared to 14% with Wegovy. And shares of Campbell's, they're down this morning 3% after it gave the quarterly update. It also named Mick Bakehausen as its next CEO. He will be replacing Mark Klaus, who is leaving to become president of the NFL's Washington Commanders. There you go. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash. Paul and Tom.
Lisa, thanks so much. Greatly appreciate that this morning. I was sitting there, on the beach at Turks and Caicos. It was really, really lovely. There's there's a little cabana place. Colby Smith told me about it once. She's over at the FT, and it was nice. And Paul, I'm thinking about this great bull market. When did it start for you? Because the kids don't know. They've never seen this.
I mean, 2022 was a brutal year for stocks and bonds, but since
October
then,
of 22.
yeah, that's where we've been.
Yardeni and Ralph and Kapora said, shut up and buy.
Yep.
And to me, there's that. And then before that, I remember how lonely Ben Laidler was then at HSBC. Christmas Eve, 2018. Shut up and buy.
Exactly.
Up 145%.
There you go. Yep.
Through a pandemic.
Yeah, exactly.
And
thank you, Federal Reserve.
Do you feel? I don't feel the exuberance out there.
I did have an Uber driver ask me about a bunch of stuff on a couple of days ago, so that's usually a sign.
Okay, that's a sign.
That's a sign. He's asking me what you're like off the air, and I said, "You don't want to."
You don't want to know. Lisa does that. Lisa single-handedly destroyed my reputation. What's he like? It's just, well, if you really want to know.
Exactly.
But it's a great bull market.
It is. It is. And if you got a Fed
futures are
cutting,
45,000 on the Dow.
I know. And thank you, Federal Reserve, for cutting rates. And earnings have been pretty solid here, Tom. Economic activity has been better than I think most people would have expected. And there you go.
There we are.
Now, a look at the front pages. What's making news around the world? Your daily roundup of today's headlines from major publications.
Our newspapers. It's a Lisa Mateo hour. She's not seen Moana 2. Either have I. What do you got, Lisa?
I know. I definitely not in the movie
This weekend.
Let's see, where I want to start. Okay, so we'll start with the Washington Post. They're talking about Starbucks and Nestle. They're facing some scrutiny. This is because of labor practices over in China. They're saying coffee farms and Starbucks, Nestle's supply chains in China, they're not living up to ethical standards. This is according to a report by China Labor Watch. They said they're using kids as workers. They're making workers work excessive hours, different safety standards. So it's an investigation that covered about 26 farms, but it really starts to show how the challenges that these big companies are facing, monitoring labor costs and labor in China. Both companies did say that they pledged to investigate further, but it's just something going on now that they're starting to become more aware of.
Paul mentions his driver. I had a driver this morning, Bentley in the garage, and he said he's just back from Thailand. And he says, do Americans understand those people are making $12 a day? Yeah. I mean, the labor, Steve Roach called it the labor arbitrage. Yeah. And so this is all
Price
about.
of coffee is up 58% year to date.
Right.
So it's been, it's amazing.
How does Starbucks manage it? They hedge
well,
it?
What's your daughter's latte mocha?
Oh, the latte
thing
runs me about $8 now.
Yeah, exactly. For a cup
of coffee?
Well, she gets the big one, of course.
The venti.
The venti,
in
yes.
Pittsburgh, martinis cost $8.
Exactly.
Good
That's
point.
the world we live in.
I need a martini after
Next.
that latte. Okay, I might have to ask Baltunis about this next story, but meme coins, they are having a moment. Financial Times saying you can thank President-elect Donald Trump for this. So these are tokens that are representing online viral moments. Things like the euthanized gray squirrel, like the pygmy hippopotamus, the cartoon dog. They've all exploded in value since last month's U.S. presidential election. More established meme coins like Dogecoin, Tom's favorite, they've outperformed Bitcoin over the past month. They've even been joined by a group of new coins. But critics are saying, you know what, meme coins, nothing more than this entertaining asset. Yeah, they say they're reminiscent of the craze from the NFTs during the crypto bubble of 2021. But
so traders, I guess, they're
moment.
betting that the Trump administration will usher in more crypto-friendly attitudes and regulations in Washington. I guess that's the fundamental play behind it.
That's the reason.
No idea.
The reason.
All right, you
I'm
kids
not
have fun
going to
with
comment
that.
because everyone knows where I am on
Yeah,
this.
so just those kids, you can have fun with that. Speculate all you want. Have fun.
Okay, we'll go to sports now. Okay, Juan Soto, he's been having talks with everyone. His agent is saying, from the Yankees, his agent is saying he's starting to eliminate teams from those negotiations.
There's two teams. Let's be honest.
All right. So who has he met? He's met with the Yankees, right? The Mets, Los Angeles Dodgers, Boston Red Sox, Toronto Blue Jays.
Let's just cut to the chase.
That's where it is.
We'll give him Plymouth Rock. Good morning, 92.9 Boston. Let's give Juan Soto Plymouth Rock.
Yep.
Join the Red Sox. What do you got? What's the update?
God. So his agent is just saying Juan is a methodical thinker. He hasn't said yet, but he rejected those who say high-spending teams like the Yankees and Dodgers are buying championships. So he rejected that offer. But Soto, what's the history? So he turned down $440 million, 15-year offer from Washington back in 2022. That moved him to the Nationals to trade him to San Diego, which dealt him to the Yankees last December. So he's looking for money. So who's going to give it to him? We'll see. But he's starting to eliminate some of those choices.
Yankees, Mets. I think that's what it comes down to.
When he was on the Padres, there was a pitcher named Snell, who reminds me, Red Sox fans, of Bruce Hurst from years ago, where when he shows up, he's the best pitcher in baseball. And Snell just joined the Dodgers.
Yep.
So for Snell and Soto to be back with the Dodgers is sick.
Yep. It's going to
be. Do we know he's eliminated?
No, he won't say. But he's starting to eliminate.
Oh, boy. What I've hear on sports radio, we'll hear something next week, and I'll defer to Ari on that. He knows all that stuff. But
okay, good.
We'll have official surveillance team coverage.
Exactly.
Probably a remote in Boston.
Right.
Coming from Plymouth Rock. Exactly. Giving it to Juan Soto. What do you got?
All right, last one. You can now get a pizza and a wedding dress delivered all in one order.
Now we're talking.
The reason why David's Bridal teamed up with DoorDash. So now DoorDash is delivering bridal dresses in under an hour, if you can believe it or not. But the company really needs it. I mean, you think about it, they filed for bankruptcy twice. But what they thought it would be big because they did test runs with like the accessories, like necklaces, shapewear. They thought that would be the hot thing. But they said, no, it's actually the dresses that women are ordering. Not just wedding dresses, but, you have the prom dresses. You have, the bridesmaid dresses, all those kind of things. So now this is becoming, I guess, the hot new thing. So
well,
now
here's the demo, I think, Lisa. 2/3 of brides between the ages of 27 and 28, which is the key demographic for David's Bridal, use last mile delivery service via apps on a regular basis.
Yeah, so that makes sense.
Yeah, we shut that down in my household quick. Yeah. Yeah, that's just I will never pay for that.
You won't. I know. They tried the DoorDash with the McDonald's. Doesn't work either.
Because like
but a
$10
wedding dress.
Yeah, that's something maybe. All right.
Depends on the price of it. I don't know.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that's something new.
Last
Retail,
mile
DoorDash getting into that. So
Lisa Mateo, the Lisa Mateo Hour. Thank you so much. Newspapers. With Lisa Mateo. Futures up 17. Want to make clear here, there's a continued NASDAQ lift. NASDAQ futures up 0.6%. We had Dow futures at 45,000 with a print there. We'll see if we get that on the market opening. What are we doing this morning? We're doing Tom Elmhurst. What does he do? He sits in a room and makes records. Adele was one of his clients. Nice. She called up with Paul Epworth and said, "Can you save this song?" And Elmer said, "I think I can do it."
This is Bloomberg Surveillance with Tom Keene and Paul Sweeney.
What do you say to people scared stiff in cash?
We've got an administration, presumably, that will be pro-business, lower taxes.
With Lisa Mateo on markets.
AI affecting demand for cloud computing.
And Michael Barr with news.
U.S. Secretary of State discussed the conflict in Gaza.
The best in economics, finance, investment, and international relations. This is Bloomberg Surveillance on Bloomberg Radio.
Good morning, everyone. Paul Sweeney, Tom Keene, Michael Barr, Lisa Mateo, all together again. A busy, power-packed hour here of world events, international relations. We'll look at foreign exchange and what it tells us about the view forward for equities, bonds, and commodities as well. George Saravelos with us in moments. First, we will go to Paris. Bloomberg Surveillance this morning. We're brought to you by Cohn-Resnick Advisory. Assurance Tax. Discover optimization strategies that are helping CFOs make their finance function more competitive and resilient. Talk to Cohn-Resnick's advisors. We thank Cohn-Resnick for heritage support of Bloomberg Surveillance. NASDAQ futures up 0.6%. I'm still in the triple leveraged all cash fund from the Interactive Broker Studios. Lisa Mateo, our business flash.
You got it. We have futures advancing. Fresh record closing highs for the NASDAQ and the S&P 500. So yes, NASDAQ futures up 0.6%, 133 points. Dow futures up 0.3%, 175 points. S&P futures up 0.2%, 17 points. The 2-year yield 4.20%, up 2 basis points. The yield on the 10-year 4.27%, up 4 basis points. A global look to stocks in Asia falling after South Korea's president faces impeachment after declaring martial law. We have the Kospi down nearly 1.5%. The CAC in Paris, that's up about 0.3%. President Emmanuel Macron urging lawmakers to reject that no confidence vote that would topple the government. That voting start to take place at 4 p.m. local time. That's 10 a.m. Wall Street time. Over to shares of Salesforce up 12%. That's after earnings beat thanks to demand for its AI products. And shares of Foot Locker down 15%. Shoppers easing up before the holidays. And it looks like shoppers, well, they like their discounts because shares of Dollar Tree up more than 4%. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Paul.
Lisa, thanks so much. December 7th, there'll be the emotion of an opening of Notre Dame. I believe the First Lady will be there. Mr. and Mrs. Trump will be there, the President-elect, and all assembled of France. The focus will be on the restoration of Notre Dame. The focus now is on the survival of the Assemblée Nationale. Joining us in Paris, Caroline Conan. Caroline, I don't want to turn this into a French civics lesson, but it's real simple. Americans don't understand the fragility of the Fifth Republic back to 1958. Caroline Conan, how fragile is the Republic of France this morning?
And Tom, you were talking about the reopening of Notre Dame this weekend with Donald Trump expected here. And clearly, the last thing that President Macron wants is to show this fragility of France on international stage during this weekend of festivities for the reopening of the cathedral. So in the short term, what we're going to see here over the next few hours from the National Assembly, probably the Prime Minister, Michel Barnier, will be toppled by a vote of no confidence, meaning that Emmanuel Macron has very little time between now and this weekend to reappoint possibly a new prime minister. And as you mentioned, this does show the fragility of the Fifth Republic, because the Fifth Republic, was designed as a presidential regime to avoid this kind of back and forth in parliament, to avoid this fragmentation in the National Assembly. And yet today the National Assembly will be able to topple this government because no one has a majority.
Caroline, we perceive Michel Barnier as a French, he's a bureaucrat. Paul, he's a lot like Mario Draghi. If the left is ascendant, 2 parties on the left, 2 parties on the right, is this the point where the left could reassert themselves from my childhood?
Exactly, and that is the key point, I think, in the next few hours and even in the next few days, is that this government will likely not survive today, this vote of no confidence. But then what is next? There is no majority. Clearly, the National Rally doesn't want to support any kind of reform, any kind of budget put forward by a centrist majority. So what else? Then you have to turn to the socialists. The socialists, they have 66 MPs in the National Assembly. So technically, if there is a sort of very wide, what we call Republican front here, wide coalition from the center-left, the socialists, towards the center-right, then possibly you have a way out of this masquerade that Marine Le Pen has been describing over the past few days.
Caroline, what are the practical implications for the day-to-day working of the French government here with a no-confidence vote and maybe a vacuum of leadership at the prime minister level? Are things getting done? Is government shutting down? What's the day-to-day for the French people?
the way the system is designed in France, there is not going to be any shutdown like we see sometimes in the United States. There are some special laws that the government can actually use in order to get this day-to-day funding and pay the nearly 6 million public servants we have in France and keep collecting taxes. So this is going to continue in terms of the continuity of the states, continuity of the funding. But clearly, if there is no new budget, that means automatically the thresholds for inflation are not going to be taken into account, so taxes could increase for as many as 17 million French people.
Caroline, one final comment to Paul's good question on the French people. Are they engaged in this moment of elites, the fancy people in France? Are the people of France transfixed by the moment?
They're obviously very tired of this whole thing that we've seen since the snap elections, and they blame mainly President Emmanuel Macron. In fact, you have about 2/3 of the French who are calling for the president to resign, even though at the moment this is not the option that is on the table. President Macron will probably stay until the end of his mandate, which is in 2027. He has, at the moment, excluded any resignation, but they are actually looking at this puzzle, looking at this elite, totally blocking the country with obviously some regret on what happened during the snap elections.
Now, do you feel, Caroline, one final question, that Team Surveillance needs to come to Paris next week to provide team coverage with you of this moment? Do we need Lisa Mateo, Michael Barr, Paul Sweeney, and Tom Keene in Paris with Caroline Conan?
I think you should have come today, Tom, in fact, because, what President Macron is actually trying to do is to solve all this in the next 48 hours before the big Notre Dame reopening. But, you never know if there is no majority, if there's no agreement with the center left, you could see still another motion of no confidence against the next prime minister, maybe.
That sounds like an invitation.
Yep,
Caroline Conan, thank you so much. Outside Dior at Rue Montagne there this morning in Paris. We turn to the litmus paper of the global system. We welcome all of you on YouTube on your commute quickly with George Saravelos of Deutsche Bank. George, whither the dollar in your view forward, not like the year-end outlook, but the bet on the dollar? Is it a resilient dollar, or can you model out dollar strength?
Hi, good morning, Tom. So it really all is about the policy mix over the next few years. That's how we think about it, the combination of fiscal and trade policy. And the bottom line is, if you think about what is priced, you're still not pricing an aggressive mix of fiscal easing or protectionist trade, which is what President Trump communicated in the election campaign. So we still see the market as pricing on a scale of 1 to 10, roughly a 3 out of 10. And therefore, there is more potential, I think, for the dollar to strengthen over the next few months as we price more in. But over the medium term, it really boils down to whether the rest of the world can solve some of these structural issues which are weighing on both China and Europe. And the longer these things are delayed, I think the stronger the dollar will remain over the longer term.
George, we were just trying to get an update from one of our reporters in Paris about the uncertainty there, the political uncertainty in France. I'm looking at the euro here as a proxy. We're now below 1.05. Is parity something that you think is possible for the euro with the dollar?
That's our forecast for the euro next year. I think depending on what happens both out of Europe and the US, there are even scenarios where we could go below parity towards 95, for example.
Wow.
I would say the key variable at the moment that is impacting the market and the economy is uncertainty, especially in Europe. There are very high levels of uncertainty across the board, both in terms of the political outcomes, and we're seeing the negotiations around the budget in France, both around global foreign policy. And the difficulty with uncertainty is it's very hard to model the economic impact, but it's very clear that this is showing up. And I think this is one reason why the European economy is underperforming, for example.
Is there a credible bear case for the U.S. dollar? I'm hard-pressed to find one.
So I would say there always has to be, because if there's no way for something to go down, it must mean we're not doing our job properly in terms of thinking about the scenarios. So here are the two downside risks for the dollar. The first one would be if we are wrong about the fiscal policy outlook and we get a material fiscal tightening in the US, whether that is due to an inability to agree to something, although presumably that probability is low given you've had a red sweep. But if you have fiscal tightening, that would lead to slower growth and a more dovish Fed, and I think the dollar would go down. That would be one scenario. The second scenario would be what I would call institutional instability, a challenge of the stability of the institutions in the US. You would see that, for example, if Fed independence was challenged, that would be one that would certainly hit the dollar. And I think one reason the dollar is actually strong is that the market is seeing institutional fragility outside of the US, seeing it in France, seeing it in Korea. And I think that's a key driver over recent weeks of dollar strength.
Tell me about the opportunity in Canada. They got a president who's unloved. They got the tariff worries. George, you're writing about Canada. How do you profit from weak Canada now? Do you go loonie or do you go Canada renminbi? What's the take that Deutsche Bank has there?
I think Canada is going to be an interesting test case as far as President Trump's tariff policies go. So we did see Canada being lumped together with Mexico in a social media post President Trump made just a few days ago, highlighting immigration and the fentanyl epidemic. Now, the interesting thing is, when you compare the flow of immigration and fentanyl in Canada to the US and Mexico to the US, the orders of magnitude are immensely different. Now, that would suggest the odds of an aggressive tariff policy towards Canada are quite low. The market is indeed pricing that, and that is our assumption, which is why we have this view that Canada should be outperforming currencies such as the euro, for example. But let's see. I think if come January 20th and there's no tariffs on Canada, we'll be fine. But there is still a very high degree of uncertainty on that front as well.
George, too short a conversation. We had to do Paris as they blow up this morning with Caroline Cohn. George Saravelos at Deutsche Bank. We need a longer conversation soonest. He is with Deutsche Bank and foreign exchange, to say the least. So the question, Paul, is you got a given problem.
Yep.
You do a strategy, which is Trudeau's flat on his back. Canada's terrible. The Montreal Canadiens are a disgrace. I mean, you lined it up.
Yep.
And you go, how long Canada? Which pair do you play against?
Yeah,
I believe I heard him say loonie euro.
Loonie euro.
So it'd be euro loonie,
Okay.
euro loonie. But maybe it's dollar Canada. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm just, for a lot of our friends that are going over to Europe, I mean, again, the dollar's been strong here. And George saying parity's not out of the question. And he could see it even going to 95 versus the dollar. So how about that? So we'll keep an eye on that.
I have to see that. George Saravelos, thank you so much. And we'll do much more of that on into the year end. We're out on YouTube. Subscribe, please. Bloomberg Podcasts.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
In the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio, I'm Lisa Mateo. We've got futures pointing to a higher open. This is investors look to this week's key jobs data. Also remarks today from Chair Jay Powell for any clues on when the Fed will cut rates in December. Now, you had the Fed's Mary Daly said that a rate cut this month, not certain, but does remain on the table. NASDAQ futures leading the charge this morning, up 0.6%, 143 points. Dow futures up 0.3%, same for S&P futures. The two-year yield, 4.19%, up 1 basis point. The yield on the 10-year, 4.26%. And that's up about 3 basis points. We have Brent crude $73 a barrel, WTI crude $70 a barrel, and spot gold at $2,637 an ounce. To currencies, the Bloomberg Dollar Spot Index up about 0.1%. The Korean won, that is up about 0.7%. South Korea's opposition ramping up pressure on President Suk-Yeol. Then you have the euro down about 0.1%, and that's ahead of a no confidence vote taking place today. More earnings to get to. Hormel Foods reported a net sales forecast that missed estimates, but its shares up about 2%. And shares of Chewy down 2%. Third quarter net sales missed estimates. And finally, shares of Marvel Technology up 13%. It delivered a better than expected result and also an upbeat earnings forecast. For on-demand news 24 hours a day, subscribe to Bloomberg News Now, wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Lisa Mateo. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Paul and Tom.
So do you understand the irony of doing news back-to-back of Hormel and Spam and Chewy back? I mean,
perfect.
I missed that.
Are we there?
Absolutely. Who doesn't love a little spam?
A little spam every once in a while. I mean,
does the
in
heart
college,
good.
it was
Had
one
it
of
growing up.
See,
I had it growing
some
up.
of you don't have spam in the Mateo
Not
household
now, no.
I'm shocked.
Whole nut.
You don't
granola.
remember this. I mean, it was one of the 4 food groups.
Yeah, of course.
Because we didn't have ramen noodles.
No.
I mean, that was, we were way too beyond it. So yet spam is one of the 4 food groups.
Yes,
No
and corned
problem
beef.
Good morning, Hormel. Thank you there. Lisa, you should try some spam. It's been a decade, 2 decades.
It's been a lot longer.
Let's go to someone who I'm sure has never had spam. Joining us right now here with futures up 18, Freya Bemis joins us. We're going to try to slow, the show's been a blur this morning. Let's slow it down. The chief economist at TS Lombard, Freya Bemis, joins us. Freya, I want you to talk to investors about the cacophony of democracy news. South Korea, France, all that's going on in the United States of America. How do you filter that international relations into a belief in investment?
Yeah, absolutely. I think we've got increasing political instability at both poles of the economy as a result of sustained increases in inequality in both the US and China at the extremes, but various other forms of inequality. The UK clearly, housing is the big issue, and across Europe as well. This is essentially because the political system, I believe, has pushed the economic system to the opposite of extreme of what we saw in the 70s. So policies that were in place in the 80s to correct the problems of the 70s and were absolutely correct, what should have been put in place in the 80s, were kept in place. And then we had hyperglobalization, and that has swung the sort of the balance of power between labor and capital all the way towards capital and away from labor, and the democratic situation environment is kind of reeling from that. So we have various different sort of policy responses. I think in France, we're still relatively confident that at least the ECB will step in against disorderly moves against oats, just because of the central position of oats as collateral in the repo market. If the ECB can't defend the repo market, then what's it good for other than crushing demand back down to some kind of notion of supply?
Paul,
term premium, that's where it comes up.
You're in Timber Fidelity, Paul.
Yep.
77% of stocks are above their 200-day moving average.
Okay. Wow. Okay.
Wow.
That's broad.
Yeah.
Broadening out.
Yeah.
Freya, did you guys at TS Lombard, did you change your, global economic outlook at all when it became clear that President-elect Donald Trump was in fact going to win the election, when we were going to get a pretty solid Republican representation in Congress, did that change the way you guys thought about global economic outlook?
In some ways, ironically, it made us think more positively about Europe, which sounds like a very odd position. I think some of the tariffs will be negotiated away at the business level. I think that's the level at which this is going to operate. That, of course, has severe implications for how the CBO is going to score tariffs, and that has implications back to the US for how much this is actually going to impact in a macroeconomic sense. The fiscal policy is actually going to have an impact. From the European perspective, though, I think some of this can be negotiated away. I think Germany and Ireland are particularly exposed. But the major thing that we see as positive from the perspective of European rebalancing is that the withdrawal of the US as the international policeman, as the kind of the primary funder for Ukraine, forces European politicians, whether they be in Germany, France, Italy, where there are big defense companies as a base there, it forces them to really think about fiscal federalism, which I think is a positive thing in the context of the Euro experiment. And that's probably, I think, going to start to come through in the German elections, which come hot on the heels of increases in support for the AfD in the most recent elections.
What is the state of the European Union right now, Freya, from an economic perspective? How united is the EU these days? Because, again, it sounds like the United States is going to take perhaps a heavier hand here in global trade.
Yeah, but I think Europe is such a bureaucratic creature that it almost needs a crisis to galvanize it. And certainly the first crisis in recent history was the pandemic that brought about Next Generation EU, after which we saw in the countries benefiting from Next Generation EU a real watershed moment for private capex, for purchases of machines by businesses. And that just sort of demonstrates that there is a positive synergy there to be captured between public spending and private spending. And now what this kind of second crisis, which is the threat that Donald Trump poses to Europe, this crisis, I think, also suggests that Europe might move more down that route of fiscal federalism, bypassing the constitutional debt brake in Germany, which has been, I think, a brake on European growth for just too long. With the ECB, I think that the problem for growth cyclically in Europe has been that the ECB is determined to say that there's been a structural deterioration of European growth, and they've probably overdone that and kept policy too tight and prevented productivity growth from responding.
From where you sit, I guess the elephant in the room for you, Beamish. France is 57% of the pie goes to the government. There's no American equivalent to that. Do you just assume France has to struggle to modify their large government component, or is it just embedded permanently into the culture and the people?
I'm not sure if it's so much a cultural thing as a result of the macroeconomic setup that the country finds itself in. There is a sort of an exorbitant privilege for France, which is that it gets to finance at German rates, although that's now being called into question. And they've organized the budget around the proposition that they are protected by German fiscal austerity, and the budget is a direct result. The profligacy of the budget is a direct result of that European setup.
I got 30 seconds. This is too important. Wei Li of BlackRock was on modeling 3% China growth out there, 3-4 years out. Do you model 3% China growth? Can it really diminish to that level?
Yeah, I reckon it can potentially even go lower than that. This is a country which certainly is pivoting positively towards domestic demand, but there's going to be a long period of deleveraging, particularly with the property market. They're only just coming into sustainable range, and they need to run below sustainable range for several years before they can actually correct those imbalances.
Really helpful. Freya Beamish, thank you so much with T.S. Lombard this morning. Paul, I can't get my head around 3% China GDP. No. That's a changed world.
That's a changed world. We've been used to a minimum of 6% type of GDP growth there, and certainly double digits before that. So things are changing there in the Chinese economy. We've seen that for years now.
Economic data, ISM services. It's already ADP.
Sure.
There's a jobs report Friday.
We got a lot of stuff happening.
I didn't know that. Stay with us on YouTube. Subscribe at Bloomberg Podcast. Good morning.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio, I'm Lisa Mateo. We've got more economic data out this morning, so let's get right to it. We'll start with private payrolls provider ADP. It says 146,000 jobs added in November. Now, that's slightly less than economists had expected. It comes ahead of the government's jobs report on Friday. U.S. mortgage rates dropped to the lowest level since mid-October. That's with the contract rate on a 30-year mortgage falling to 6.69% last week. That's according to the Mortgage Bankers Association. And that pushed its index for home purchase applications up to the highest level since the start of the year. Now, today, we'll also get a report on from S&P Global, the ISM Services Index, and also a read on factory and durable goods orders. To the markets we go. We'll start with NASDAQ futures up 0.6%, 137 points. Dow futures up 0.4%, 180 points. S&P futures up about 0.2%. We have the 2-year yield at 4.19%, up 1 basis point. The yield on the 10-year 4.27%, and that's up 4 basis points. To commodities, the Bloomberg Dollar Spot Index up about 0.1%. Want to point out the Korean won up 0.7%, and also the euro down about 0.1%. We have Bitcoin that's lower, down about 0.3% at just around 95,000. Few companies making news. That's Microchip Technology pausing its application for U.S. semiconductor subsidies. The company was actually in line for $162 million in grants. That was from the Chips and Science Act. Then you have 7NI. It's weighing an IPO. That's for its U.S. assets. It's part of a proposed $60 billion management buyout. And finally, Coca-Cola pushing back its goals for using recycled materials to 2035. They're saying that it reflects some changing priorities. That is your Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Paul.
Lisa, thanks so much. Greatly appreciate that. We're doing some more on the equity markets here in a bit, but what we're really doing is economics into the jobs report on Friday. As always, our economic indicators are brought to you by Commonwealth. Join over 2,000 independent financial advisors. They are taking control of their growth with advisor-centric support and future-ready technologies. Grow as your own on your own terms with a partner dedicated to your success. Go to commonwealth.com to learn how. Thank you, Commonwealth, for leadership on our economic coverage. Speaking of leadership, Constance Hunter advances the debate. Chief economist at EIU, basically living on airplanes is no exaggeration, and joins us in studio today. Forget about the economic babble. Anecdotally, what did you see in your recent trip to Beijing?
So there's a saying in Chinese called "same bed, different dreams," and it basically that's the literal saying, and it sort of means, well, people may be sleeping in the same bed, but they have different dreams. And historically,
what is this, divorce therapy with Dr. Tom?
Well, hold on, we're getting there. Every trip, 25 years I've been going to China. The Chinese are same bed, same dream when it comes to their view of the Chinese economy, right? Very few people, even in private, will sort of step out very far from what the official government view is. Completely different this trip. People were saying people were openly saying that China has a problem. Now, economists at Chinese banks are restricted from saying the word deflation. They cannot say that word. The bond market can say that word clearly in China, but the economists cannot. So they were finding what I call economic dog whistle ways of saying that, right? They were presenting Chinese GDP as a percent of US GDP in current dollars with real exchange or with actual exchange rates, right? So you can see the deflation there. But I have to say, I think the best case for China is they become Japan. That is the best case scenario.
But that's no growth, no. Are they willing to
the
accept
official
that?
numbers that they're growing, I think if you look under the hood, it's very possible. You don't put out an 8% of GDP stimulus if your economy is growing your target of 5%. Sorry, you just don't do it. So what's the output gap? Is it 1%, 2%? I don't know, but you have to assume that they're flat to slightly negative.
Wow. How do the folks in China view the election of President-elect Donald Trump?
Well, that was the subject of many of my meetings.
Yep.
There's concern, but I want to throw a statistic out at you. U.S. companies operating in China make 2 times in like dollar amount what U.S. domestic companies make exporting to China. So we have a lot of U.S. firms that are in China on the ground operating businesses and making money. On the other hand, I think the risk that this like just escalates and gets out of control, and there's a tit for tat,
Right.
I think is significant.
Catherine Mann at Brandeis, of course, now with the Bank of England off of Citigroup, was just iconic on the codependency of America with China. How are we codependent with the GDP people moving from 7% GDP to OMG, they'll never go below 5% GDP, to Wei Li at BlackRock modeling out 3% GDP? How does Catherine Mann's codependency end up, say, in 2030?
So that's a great question. I don't know that it changes it that much because we are still dependent on China for supply chains. Now, obviously, we saw supply chains elongate significantly at the first round of Trump tax cuts. We saw a lot of production move to Vietnam. We saw production move to Mexico. We saw it move to other places. But China has an infrastructure that, let's say, a country like India cannot come in and easily supplant, right? So in terms of production, they have developed a really viable ecosystem that's going to be hard to replace. And even if their domestic demand is low in the economy, and even if they're suffering from a real estate crisis like Japan did after 1993, they're still going to be able to export to the rest of the world. They're just not going to import quite as much.
So when you meet with your clients in China, is there a belief that a trade war with the West, not just the U.S., that can't be in their best interest?
No, and I mean, there's a wide so the question is the big question was what could they negotiate with? What are their negotiating tactics? And they obviously can't go back and be like, okay, now we're going to buy the soybeans, right, from the first failed commitments of the first tariff. I think one thing that could be a substantial negotiating point would be purchasing oil and gas, LNG, from the United States. Now that's obviously not instantaneous. You have to put in the infrastructure that allows that to occur, but that is consistent with what the new president wants to do with regard to beefing up U.S. oil and gas presence globally.
Help us with the Economist Intelligence Unit and the EIU view of the great missed call 12 months back, which is solid real GDP in the U.S. in shockingly buoyant nominal GDP, leading to all the chit-chat on American exceptions. Colby Smith's article in the FT.
That was a great article.
Charts. Colby always has charts. I mean, it fills space. But Constance, tell me about the EIU view on America's buoyant economy.
Yeah, I mean, I have to say I've been pretty rah-rah U.S. buoyant economy and really forecast that we were going to have productivity growth. And part of the reason is an intersection of both a technological advancement alongside some inflation, right? You don't have the impetus to replace labor with capital if labor is cheap. So the fact that during the pandemic we saw wages go up as much as they did really made people think about, well, hey, hold on, what can I do with labor-saving technology? But what's interesting about AI, and some of the latest work from Daron Acemoglu, shows that AI allows people to start doing new tasks. It assists them to do new tasks better, and that raises wages, productivity, and return on capital.
Paul, can AI have afterthought, empty the dishwasher?
Exactly.
That's all I want to know.
That's all we want to know.
Robots that empty the dishwasher is the holy grail.
That's the future.
One more question, please.
Constance, when you're over in China, do your clients there, do they acknowledge that the U.S. economy, the term is exceptionalism, do they view the U.S. economy materially better than the Chinese economy, in sync with? How do they think about the U.S. economy?
That's an excellent question. I have to say that if I were to explicitly ask that would be a very impolitic thing to do. But yes, there is some acknowledgement in private conversations, like, wow, that's really working. But there's still also this view that the Chinese way is maybe the better way, that it's going to improve living standards, and TBD, because they're not going to be able to get consumption up that's just going to be really impossible for them to do, given that they're in a classic balance sheet recession.
Constance, thank you so much. Constance Hunter with EIU in our studios here at our world headquarters. As we speak, Michael McKee making opening comments at the Bloomberg Monetary Policy Conference here. And it's a star-studded event. We will have Mr. McKee in conversation with the newly minted president of the St. Louis Fed, Alberto Mussolem. We'll listen to that conversation here in about an hour. Here's your message for this morning. Futures up, and at the margin, they continue to advance into this 840 moment for Global Wall Street time. NASDAQ futures up 0.7%. The VIX 13.12. With our news in New York City, Michael Barr.
Thank you very much, Tom, Paul, Lisa. President-elect Donald Trump may be making a change on one of his key cabinet picks. Let's get the latest with Bloomberg's John Tucker.
The Wall Street Journal reports Trump is considering Florida Governor Ron DeSantis as a possible replacement for Pete Hegseth to run the Pentagon. Hegseth, the former Fox News host, is facing accusations of alcohol abuse on the job and sexual misconduct. On Capitol Hill yesterday, South Carolina Republican Senator Lindsey Graham voiced his concerns.
Some of this stuff is going to be difficult.
The choice of DeSantis would be a remarkable turn. The Florida governor's decision to challenge Trump in the GOP primary began a bitter war between the two, with Trump casting DeSantis as disloyal. I'm John Tucker, Bloomberg Radio.
Donald Trump's nominee to run the Drug Enforcement Administration says he's withdrawing his name from consideration. In a post on X, Hillsborough County, Florida Sheriff Chad Cronister called the nomination the honor of a lifetime, but must back away from the opportunity. No word on why. South Korea's opposition parties have submitted a motion to impeach President Yoon Suk-Yeol. Yoon, who is deeply unpopular, is facing pressure to leave office hours after he ended a short-lived martial law that prompted troops to encircle parliament before lawmakers voted to lift it. President Macron is urging French lawmakers to reject a no-confidence motion that could topple the government. Far-right leader Marine Le Pen and her National Rally Party plan to support the motion, which could pass with the backing of a left-wing coalition. Finally, on the west front lawn of the U.S. Capitol.
3, 2, 1. There you go. Hey!
The Christmas tree was lit in a ceremony hosted by House Speaker Mike Johnson. The 80-foot-tall Sitka spruce, nicknamed Spruce Wayne, made the long trip from Alaska. Global news 24 hours a day and whenever you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Michael Barr, and this is Bloomberg. Tom, Paul, Lisa.
Michael Barr with us after his work with the Detroit Lions over the last couple of weeks. Michael, I mean, it really is special back to our Ute. And the fact is 3 of the top, 7 teams in the NFL all are within a phone call of Detroit, including Detroit Green Bay this Thursday. Would you care to comment on the Lions' chance in hosting Green Bay this Thursday?
I am scared because, like you said, 3 teams knotted up and got to throw Minnesota in there. In fact, everybody will be talking about Minnesota if it weren't for the Lions, because, they're right there 1 game behind us. This is a scary conference. I'm not going to lie. I wish the Vikings would have lost, but they did not, and they are strong as heck. So I don't know how this is going to go.
You survived Thanksgiving?
That was the best 32 seconds I had seen in my life. That got wasted.
Have you been sleeping on the couch because of what the Bills did with the 49ers? Mrs. Barr throw you on the couch?
Mrs. Barr, and words exactly out of her mouth, I'm done this season. I'm rooting for you, Michael, and your Lions.
Wow.
Whoa.
Change of heart there.
I'm like,
marriage
wow.
counseling.
Yeah.
Michael Barr, thank you so much. Good morning, Mrs. Barr. You love the Lions. Futures up 20. Dow futures up 204. The VIX 13.1. Bull market 2. From New York City, stay with us. This is Bloomberg Surveillance.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And this futures report brought to you by IBKR. Markets never sleep, and neither does Interactive Brokers. Discover opportunities with CME Group futures across equity indices, interest rates, FX, energy, and more. Access CME futures around the clock at Interactive Brokers. We've got futures advancing, and this is after the S&P 500 notched its 55th record close this year. S&P futures up 0.3%. We have Dow futures up 0.4%. NASDAQ futures up 0.7%. The 2-year yield 4.20%. That's up 2 basis points. The yield on the 10-year 4.27%. That's up 4 basis points. To commodities, Brent crude $74 a barrel. WTI crude $70 a barrel. We have spot gold at $2,644 an ounce. To currencies, the Bloomberg Dollar Spot Index up 0.1%. The Korean won, that's up 0.7% with news surrounding South Korea's president. The euro is down about 0.2%, and that's because of that no confidence vote taking place today. Companies making news: General Motors incurring more than $5 billion in charges and write-downs that's tied to its troubled operations in China. And sources say Mitsubishi lost more than $90 million in China after uncovering suspected fraud by one of its copper traders. That is your Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Paul.
Lisa, thanks so much. Urgent note out on YouTube live chat. We got a live chat out at YouTube where you can talk to Lisa Mateo, among other advantages. Please, no talk of the Chicago Bears.
Nope.
I don't even know the details, except it's a mess.
Yeah, it's a mess.
It's
And there
just
was
a
actually
mess.
some fairly high expectations for them coming into the year, too.
Yeah.
That's what makes it a little disappointing.
We thank Michael Barr for that talk about, it's fun. I mean, I don't really follow the NFL, but I'm really having fun following old-style 14-10 football.
I can't remember the last time the Tigers were this good.
The Lions.
Yeah, the Lions. Yeah.
Tigers are not on the list to get one
forget about
soda.
it. Let's not go there. So,
Right now, Michael McKee riding charge on the 2024 Monetary Policy Symposium at Bloomberg. And, you think like Lagarde would show up or Powell or that. Somebody more important is shown up, and he's Alberto Musalem. He's with the St. Louis Fed. He's speaking right now to the assembled crew. We're going to go to Dr. Musalem of the St. Louis Fed with Michael McKee. What we're going to do, because the news flow is extraordinary, we're going to juggle this right now with Kriti Gupta. She pulled a lucky straw in Paris.
Oh.
To have lunch at the Café de la Paix down the Rue Scribe. We're going to go to Kriti and be rude and cut her off when we have to. Kriti, you're in Paris. We've talked to Caroline Conan. I think we're up to speed on the potential collapse of the National Assembly as well. How does it fold in to the Eurostar linkage of London to Paris? Does anybody matter, or is it just markets as normal in Europe?
No, Tom. This matters. This matters a great deal. If you look at the stock market in France this morning, it's green on the screen. But this is a pretty gigantic drop you've seen in the stock market and a bigger one in the bond market. The fear here and the comparison people are making in Europe is that this could be a moment that is similar or akin to that of 2011 and the Eurozone debt crisis. You are now seeing France be yield juicier returns than that of Spain and Greece, and maybe not the too distant future of Italy as well, and that's a big deal.
Kriti, we got to leave, because I just want to tell you, there is a place that has beef bourguignon on Rue Dauphine.
Now we're talking.
Go across the river from Rue Scribe, and it's a little place with a rooster on the front door. And you got to try out the beef bourguignon place, the Rooster, on Rue Dauphine in Paris. Kriti Gupta, thank you so much for that. Alberto Musalem is a newly minted president of the St. Louis Fed. Wall Street experience with Tudor Investments out of LSE, the PhD from Pennsylvania. Our Michael McKee in conversation with Alberto Musalem.
So we're within reach of the dual mandate goals, and monetary policy is well positioned. It's moderately restrictive, and appropriately so, because inflation is running above our target, and therefore interest rates are above the neutral rate. So that's the backdrop. Also, policy could be, could be accelerated, could be slowed, or could be paused. So there's some optionality depending on how the environment and the outlook evolve. So that's the backdrop. For December, I can speak about myself. I'm keeping all my options open. There's more data coming. We have, CPI, PPI, unemployment, retail sales, PMI. There's a lot of data coming between now and the December meeting. So I'm going to wait till I see that data until I can be assured in which way I'm leaning. So I think I'm keeping optionality for December in my assessment. But I do think in the broader arc of what we're trying to do, the broader arc is we want to continue to bring inflation down towards 2% while supporting the labor market. And in that broader arc, it doesn't have to be a linear process where you're going that direction no matter what. The economy needs to tell us how fast to go or how slow to go. And right now I see an economy that is growing above potential. Labor markets have full employment. Inflation is above target. My assessment of risks around the dual mandate have, as I said, the risk that inflation may have stalled, may be stalling. Not the central scenario, but there's a risk of that, have increased since September. And, all those things, plus uncertainty about where the final destination is, the neutral rate, and uncertainty about productivity trends, all those things suggest to me that the time may be coming to consider the possibility of slowing down or possibly pausing.
What is it that you want, if the economy is speaking to you, what is it that you want the economy to say that will help you make a decision? If we have data come in as forecast on Wall Street, as anticipated by your Fed forecasts, are we at the kind of place in the economy where you would be comfortable pausing?
I think what I would like to see going forward is with rates above their neutral level, because inflation is above 2%, I would like that to continue to exert downward pressure on inflation. And as that is happening, or expected to happen, that then interest rates can come down to neutral. So that's what I would like to see. Of course, we need to look at the other side of the dual mandate, which is the labor market. And the labor market looks pretty healthy. As I said in my remarks, I am watching the gross flows. So the unemployment rate is rather low, consistent with full employment. But if you look underneath that, the gross flows in the labor market have slowed materially. And it's important to keep an eye on that to make sure that that's not a sign of a potentially disorderly adjustment in the labor market. I think the chances of that at present are low. As I said, businesses are healthy. There is little reason for layoffs to begin to happen, but I'm attentive to that side of the mandate also.
What are the CEOs in your district telling you about their employment plans? What are you hearing?
They say that the labor market has normalized relative to a year or 2 years ago when they had meaningful labor shortages, where hiring people was difficult, where they had to pay up for new hires. That has normalized, so the labor market is more normal. Some CEOs, particularly CEOs that have to employ a lot of skilled labor, are still reporting shortages of skilled labor and still having to pay up to replace folks. They are reporting, for example, that turnover in the labor market that they observe has come down, consistent with the aggregate data that I talked about a minute ago. There are more job applicants per vacancy, so the labor market has eased, and it's getting easier to fill positions. They report wage gains in the 3.5% to 4% range, which is consistent with the aggregate data, and that's it.
It sounds like you're describing something that would fall into the category of soft landing or Goldilocks.
I try to stay away from labels like Goldilocks or soft landing. I think of it very clinically, and I think, we have a dual mandate, and we have to hit that dual mandate. I don't try to put labels around it. I know folks in the press love to put labels on it, and that's fine. I think as I said when I began the remarks, achieving the dual mandate is within sight. If you look at headline PC inflation, it's 0.3 above target, which is within the margin of error, within a standard deviation. If you look at the labor market, the unemployment rate is at 4.1%. That's below a level, a natural rate. So we're getting rather close, but the job isn't done. And we're very committed. I am committed, and my colleagues are very committed to finishing that job.
I take it from the way you've set this up that you think policy is restrictive now. Is it significantly so?
So, context: before we began the easing cycle in September, I think one could say policy was either restrictive or perhaps very restrictive. A way to think of it is the policy rate was above, by some margin, what policy rules would suggest to you that it should be. And you could see it in the economy when you look at the housing market, when you look at low and moderate income households which are under financial pressure. You can see it in small businesses that are levered, also having financial and financing pressure. So you could see it in different parts of the economy where the restrictiveness was and is binding. We've begun a process of recalibration, and we've brought down the interest rate by 75 basis points. In my assessment, I think, as I said in my remarks, we're getting closer to a policy rate consistent with those policy rules. So that policy rule doesn't mean you're at neutral. It means you are at neutral plus a premium for the fact that inflation is still above target. So I think policy is still restrictive. I think it's moderately restrictive. I tend to look at very broadly at things, and if you look at businesses or households that have access to capital markets financing or have savings and wealth in capital markets, that part is rather accommodative, rather supportive. Capital markets are rather supportive. So financial conditions are accommodative there. If you look at businesses or households that don't have access to capital markets, that need to finance themselves in banks and don't have wealth effects, so not on the financing side but on the investment side, cannot avail themselves of wealth effects, for those folks, businesses or households, monetary policy is rather restrictive. So on balance, I think it is still restrictive.
What happens when you get to neutral? Are companies telling you that they have a backlog of investment they want to make and they're just waiting? Or
good morning, everyone. Paul Sweeney and Tom Keene here, Bloomberg Surveillance. We're listening to really one of the first conversations of the newly minted St. Louis Fed. We try to figure out who these people are, what their tone is, what their belief is. We're doing that with Michael McKee. We welcome all of you on your commutes across the nation. Apple CarPlay, Android Auto. Good morning, 99.1 FM in Washington, up to Mount Katahdin and 92.9 FM in Boston. Here in Manhattan, as we greet the morning, and I believe we're going to go back to Dr. Mussolem here in a moment to learn about this new Fed president. There is breaking news out of Manhattan of the difficult kind. I want to be clear here. This is not the chief executive officer of UNH, United Health. But Paul, we have a Bloomberg headline that United Health Group CEO, a subdivision of US, Brian Thompson, has been fatally shot.
Yeah, shocking news coming out of Midtown Manhattan. United Healthcare CEO Brian Thompson was killed in a Midtown shooting Wednesday morning. This is according, Tom, to PIX11, a local television station in New York City, and they're citing unidentified people. Thompson was shot just before 7 a.m. near a hotel on 54th Street between 6th and 7th Avenues. Tom.
We'll have to see. That is really all we have on this. Is breaking story for Bloomberg 1130 in the tri-state area. We'll continue to follow us. Michael Barr and Lisa Mateo giving this special focus right now. Here with futures advancing through the morning. NASDAQ futures up 0.8%, the VIX 13.19. We continue our Michael McKee at our Bloomberg Monetary Policy Conference with Alberto Mussolem, Dr. Mussolem of the St. Louis Fed.
Forecast under I'm hesitating to use the word optimal, but under optimal monetary policy, right? Given the monetary policy that you think is optimal, what is the outcome for the economy? There are several, how do we do, let me go through process, then get to your question. How we do this is we take a lot of input from an array of models. We take a lot of input from talking to businesses and households all over the country. We talk to professional forecasters and understand, their perspectives. So we take a lot of input into this, and there's always uncertainty. And how we manage that uncertainty is, we have the baseline scenario, and there's balance of risks around them, and we write those down and we submit them. And some Wall Street analysts have gathered all that balance of risk data that we submit, that all the Reserve Banks submit, and they're, making statements about the reaction function of the Fed based on that balance of risk. So, going to your question, there are several policies that have been proposed during the campaign and look like they're going to be implemented over the course of this year and next year, and perhaps the years to come. I think we cannot wait until all that uncertainty is resolved to continue our SCP forecast. So we have to continue to do our job and continue to do the SCP forecasting, which is an input into our decision making every quarter. And as we progress over time, that resolution of uncertainty about, which policies, what are their contours, what is the timing of the policies, the sequencing, what is the net effect on demand, on supply, on prices, on quantities, will be revealed. Now we can't, I think it would be not good service to the people that we serve if we abstained from engaging in SCP forecasts between now and the time that resolution of that full uncertainty is achieved, which could take a year or two. So we're going to gradually absorb information as it is available to us and incorporate new policies into our forecasts once the contours of those policies are understood and we can quantify things and understand how they would affect the dual mandate.
Well, are you going to say you're data dependent in terms of what the new fiscal policies might be, or are you going to be able to make estimates of what's going to happen and react on those?
So my staff is already making, doing exercises of, for different tariff configurations, how might that affect the economy? For different fiscal configurations, how might that affect the economy? So we're beginning to exercise our muscle memory or forecasting muscle in terms of understanding, so that when you get the final configuration of these policies, we can then go back to all these exercises that we are beginning to do and understand, okay, given what, we have to take those as inputs. So take those policies as inputs and then go and analyze how that could possibly affect our dual mandate goals.
Alberto Musola, the St. Louis Fed, in conversation with Michael Key. This interview has been scheduled, this conversation scheduled for weeks. We say good morning to all of you across the nation, particular good morning in the tri-state area, Bloomberg 1130 AM. There has been a shooting in Midtown Manhattan. Paul, help me here. WPAX with the news, and Bloomberg confirms a fatal shooting of Brian Thompson of UNH, not the CEO of UNH, but one of the subgroups.
Yeah, it's the website, the United Healthcare website, is titled CEO of United Healthcare.
It's confusing.
Government programs including Medicare and retirement and communities and states. So a senior executive within the company for sure, but not the CEO of the group level. But then again, that is news coming out. He was shot outside a hotel in Midtown Manhattan. Tom.
He has been with United Health Group for over 20 years, a complete LinkedIn page, as you would expect from a senior officer of UNH. Mr. Thompson was out of the University of Iowa and went through the business that you go through, working at PwC, working at PricewaterhouseCoopers for a good 6-7 years, and then grabbed by UNH as well. He worked for Medicare and Retirement, working to their important division, government programs, this out of Minnetonka, and then as CEO, Chief Executive Officer of the United Health Group. The naming is confusing. I want to make clear this is not the senior leadership of UNH, but at a more junior level. Brian Thompson shot in Manhattan and reported WPIX with that news earlier, and now Bloomberg confirms that. With our Bloomberg news right now in a market update, our Lisa Mateo.
And we have futures advancing. This is after fresh record closing highs for the NASDAQ, S&P 500 yesterday. S&P futures right now up 0.3%. Same for Dow futures. NASDAQ futures up 0.7%. We have the 2-year yield at 4.20%. That's up 2 basis points. The yield on the 10-year, 4.27%, and that's up 5 basis points. Taking a global look, we have stocks in Asia falling with turmoil in South Korea. The Kospi index right now, it is down nearly 1.5%. The CAC and Powers, 1 point there. It's up about 0.6%. That's ahead of a no confidence vote due to start in about an hour from now. Over to currencies, the Bloomberg Dollar Spot Index up about 0.2%. We have the Korean won up about 0.7%. The euro down about 0.3%. Sales of shares of Salesforce, they're up this morning. They're up about 11%. Earnings beat thanks to demand for its AI products. And more earnings turning to Foot Locker. Its shares taking a hit, down 18%. Shoppers have been easing up before the holidays. But it looks like shoppers, they like their discounts because shares of Dollar Tree are higher. It increased its sales outlook for the full year after a better than expected third quarter. After the bell, we move on to American Eagle Outfitters and Five Below. That is your Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Paul.
Lisa Mateo, thank you so much. We're going to be very careful about sourcing, which is what we do at Bloomberg News. We're efforting our Manhattan people. For those of you across the nation, this is in Manhattan near the hugely used Hilton Hotel. Paul, you and I have had, you can't count the times we've been there for corporate events, Economic Club of New York. And I believe I saw President-elect Trump there once doing something. The Hilton Hotel that so much of America knows on 6th Avenue. The New York Post reporting the chief executive officer of United Healthcare Group, not the senior management, fatally shot outside the Hilton Midtown. And this is from the New York Post. I got to be very careful here in, quote, possible targeted attack. I want to be very careful with the language. Another post, this is from a verified user with imagery of the huge police response that we see on 6th Avenue at 54th, I think it is.
Yeah, right there, Tim.
At the hotel, 6:46 a.m. Quote, a masked man fired at the CEO and fled eastbound on 6th Avenue. These reports are verified, but at the same time, folks, let's be careful here at 9 o'clock this morning. Paul, what do you see?
Yeah, it's just, I mean, you think about this hotel, Tom, it is literally, for the folks that are not familiar with Manhattan, it is absolutely smack in the middle of Midtown Manhattan, right? It's just 54th Street, 6th Avenue, the Hilton Hotel. It's a huge hotel, lots of right near Rockefeller Center, for example. So right smack in the middle of it. Absolutely packed this time of year, Tom, with holiday
Yes, that's
travelers.
a good point. And the Sheraton right down the street.
Exactly right. So it's just to give people a sense. It's when you think of Midtown Manhattan, this is right exactly where it is.
Okay, and Brian Kobiesi, thank you, out on Twitter, very legitimate source. He picks us out the subgroup of United Healthcare that Mr. Thompson worked for. United Healthcare is the, quote, health benefits business of the Dow component, UNH, is, well, I guess, who cares about the price of the stock, but that's what we do, so we'll do that. Right now, I'm getting it up on the screen here, folks. We can do that on the Bloomberg terminal. And I don't mean to make light of this, it's grim, but the fact is I've got UNH now trading slightly down in an up market. I'd say it's indeterminate what you see with the stock. United Health now halts Investor Day event after the shooting. They must have had a, you and I know this year-end event. You've been to 420. I've been to 128. And you see that. So again, folks, to sum up here, a shooting in Midtown Manhattan, all the emotion of Manhattan over the last 90 days, 100 days into this. It's about speculation and rumor. We don't do that at Bloomberg, and Shelley Banjo knows that. She's got a fancy title now, managing editor of Global Business. She ran our New York office for far too many years. Shelley Banjo joins us this morning. Shelley, I don't need speculation, but I do need the sensitivities that Mayor Adams has of crime in New York. How do you dovetail that now into the emotion here at 9 a.m. on a Wednesday morning?
Yeah, it's emotions are definitely running high right now as we're trying to figure out what is happening. Actually, the whole company was gathered in this hotel to have this investor day, addressing their investors about their business. Initially, they kept going with the investor day, but they just about 1 minute ago stopped it and saying that they were they're dealing with a very serious medical situation and they're going to halt the investor day. So I think everyone is trying to figure out right now exactly what is happening.
And Shelley, I guess there's some questions here. This kind of just revives the whole concern about the safety within the city of New York, and that I'm sure will revive that discussion as well. Do we know anything about the randomness of this, or potentially was this a target attack? Has there been any early reporting on that?
Yes, I think it's probably too early to make a connection between crime. Right now, the earliest reports that we have from the New York Police Department is that a person was waiting for him and shot him from about 20 feet away, hitting him multiple times before fleeing. So it doesn't seem to be it wasn't some random crime that he happened to be at. It appears right now from the New York Police Department that earliest reports suggest that this was targeted.
And Shelley, I have not seen any reports, thankfully, of any other woundings here, any folks injured in this, because boy, you think about Midtown Manhattan this time of year in the holiday season, the streets are packed with local New York City folks going to and from work, as well as tourists, all around the Christmas tree and all of that type of thing. But I don't think we have any reporting, fortunately, of any other injuries.
No, not yet. That's right.
Shelley Banjo with us, folks. If you're joining us across the nation and worldwide, the news flow today, extraordinary, pushed aside for us at Bloomberg 1130 in New York by a shooting of Brian Thompson. He is the UNH subgroup. United Health Benefits is what I'm going to call it. This is not the CEO of UNH. He is dead at the Hilton Hotel in Midtown Manhattan. Shelley, perfectly timed, and this is a newly minted police commissioner, Jessica Tisch, of the city, putting out yesterday the overall index crime in New York. It has decreased 5.7% in November, and as you would expect, NYPD with all sorts of good statistics showing that shootings, quote, decreased by 61 incidents year to date, a 6.8% reduction. With great respect, Shelley, for the 24/7 you've worked reporting on New York City, is there a lessening of crime in Manhattan now versus a year ago, 2 years ago, 3 years ago?
That's as I do it, is that crime is all about statistics and how you read the statistics. So the major crime for a major city still remains incredibly low, but there are still major problems in the city, and I think that they're aware of that, and that this is what Eric Adams was elected to fix, and so I think that the people in the city sort of expect that from him, and obviously Eric Adams has had quite a bit to deal with in his own administration, and so I think that is part of the issues here.
Shelley, one of the challenges here, and folks, again, we're going to do this with great respect for we don't speculate in that, but the focusing of crime in New York City has focused from traditional geographies to the new geography of, I'm going to call it, I'm an amateur here, folks, a lower Midtown, and the question of migrants that has confronted the Adams administration. I don't want to link that debate to the shooting, as you say, completely inappropriate, but is lower Midtown, 6th Avenue, the 50s, the 40s, is it a different place than when you were our bureau chief?
I think I think that you can see that the city has certainly changed and has come back since the pandemic, but it's certainly nowhere where it was beforehand. I mean, you could still see that with the vacant buildings and whatnot. But I do think it is sort of two different issues right now between what the story is and what the story of the city is right now.
Do we have any expectation, Shelley, that the New York Police Department will have a press conference or any kind of news for us anytime this morning?
That is what we were trying to find out right now. Nothing yet.
Okay, Shelley Banjo, thank you so much. Difficult questions here. She's the former leader of our New York City Bureau, now working as managing editor of Global Business. Shelley Banjo with this report. Let us recap here before we go to Lisa, looking at futures up. And that is, there has been a shooting in New York. On Twitter, we're beginning to see good sourcing from legitimate sources. Brian Thompson of United Healthcare is dead, fatally shot outside the Manhattan 6th Avenue Hilton Hotel in New York City. And here's the key quote, Paul, for those of you in Midtown, quote, "Suspect is on the run," end quote.
Okay, there we go. So that's the latest reporting. The NYPD, I was just seeing some video and recently kind of all over the scene, as one would expect here, Tom.
Let us get an update here. We do look at the markets here, 12 minutes to the opening, with a Bloomberg Business Update. Our Lisa Mateo.
And we have this futures report sponsored by IBKR. Markets never sleep, and neither does Interactive Brokers. Discover opportunities with CME Group futures across equity indices, interest rates, FX, energy, and more. Access CME futures around the clock at Interactive Brokers. All right, we do have futures pointing to a higher open. Investors looking at this week's key jobs data that comes out Friday, but also remarks this afternoon from Chair Jay Powell. They're looking for clues on whether the Fed is going to cut interest rates in December. You already had the Fed's Mary Daly said that a rate cut this month, not certain, but does remain on the table. We have NASDAQ futures leading the charge, up about 0.7%, 165 points. Dow futures up 0.4%, 206 points. S&P futures up 0.3%, or 20 points. The two-year yield 4.20%. That's up 2 basis points. The yield on the 10-year 4.27%, and that's up 4 basis points. Heading over to commodities, we have Brent crude up about 0.5% at $73 a barrel. WTI crude $70 a barrel. We have spot gold higher at $2,648 an ounce. To currencies, the Bloomberg Dollar Spot Index up about 0.2%. The Korean won up about 0.7%, and that's as South Korea's opposition ramping up pressure on President Yoon Suk-Yeol. And the euro right now is down about 0.2%, and that's ahead of a no confidence vote that's taking place in less than an hour from now. To earnings we go. Hormel Foods, they reported a net sales forecast missed estimates, but shares up about 3%. Take a look at Tyson Foods. Those shares are lower this morning. And Chewy down 8%. Third quarter net sales missed estimates. And finally, shares of Marvel Technology, they're up about 15%. And that's after it delivered a better than expected result and also an upbeat earnings forecast. For on-demand news 24 hours a day, subscribe to Bloomberg News Now, wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Lisa Mateo. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Paul.
Lisa, thanks so much. And again, on the marginal basis, the NASDAQ lifting through the morning. We welcome all of you on your commute across the nation on YouTube. Subscribe to Bloomberg Podcasts. It has been an eventful day from France to South Korea. For us here on Global Wall Street in New York, time stops at the Hilton Hotel. There has been a shooting at Midtown. Everyone of Global Wall Street, and particularly New York Wall Street and Paul Sweeney, know the venue. I think we have to describe, Paul, you did such a good job of describing this before. Brian Thompson of United Healthcare shot, I guess, outside the Hilton Hotel, their Investor Day conference. And it's a place everyone gathers within the ballroom and with 14 other conference rooms, those endless escalators, 6, 7, 8 escalators going up and down. Explain the Hilton Hotel to our global audience.
Sure. The New York Hilton Hotel, 54th Street, 7th Avenue, right smack in the middle of Midtown Manhattan, office skyscrapers all around, Tom. The corporate offices of so many leading financial institutions and just business institutions in New York City. And he was shot outside the New York City Hilton Midtown in Manhattan, where the company is hosting an investor day here, Tom, where they bring in all their investors and the analysts, and they meet with various members of the senior management team as these companies lay out their outlooks for the upcoming years. The company has now canceled the investor day that had already begun, but they had obviously, because of this, have canceled that. The company did not immediately respond to a request for comment from Bloomberg News. But we will continue to have that full reporting throughout the day.
We spoke to Shelley Banjo, who drove the ship here at New York. It is without question for all of us at our world headquarters the most important job. She gave it over to Katja Porzykanski, expert on South America, and they gave her the job of being the bureau chief of New York City. This is the toughest job at Bloomberg. Katja joins us right now. Katja, a lot of people don't know that Bloomberg, far before Mayor Bloomberg's service, really had a focus on the city beat in Manhattan. What do your team of reporters report this morning on the shooting at the Hilton Hotel?
Well, right now, we're in touch with the police, and we've been getting details from the police on the attack, which it's very early right now. But the suspect, we are told, is still at large, and it's from the descriptions from police sources, it seems that it was somewhat targeted, that the individual was waiting for Brian for the CEO to arrive, and he arrived early to work on his presentation. He was giving a presentation today, so he had arrived early, and the individual was waiting for him outside of the hotel. This is all early, reporting. This may, of course, more details may come through, and according to people familiar with the matter.
People familiar with the matter know, Katja, that Midtown Manhattan can be people going up and down the streets or into the subway or on a bus. How would you suggest the New York Police Department will distribute their resources to find the shooter that is believed at large?
Well, we have a police force that is the size of an army in New York City, and they have an incredible way of catching people very quickly. They apparently the individual had run into. I'm just pulling up some of the details here, but the individual had run away into, I think it was I'm sorry, I'm a little behind.
That's
but
okay.
He shot him from 20 feet away and fled on foot through the Ziegfeld pass-through. And I would imagine that we will have the police will find him pretty soon. Though he was masked, that does not stop the New York Police Department from finding people.
Katja, do we have any? Has the NYPD suggested when they will give us more information? Are they planning on holding any kind of press briefing at all, or is it just way too early in the process?
They will inevitably have a press release on this, a press conference on this, and probably soon. No details yet on that, but we will be watching that closely and reporting that.
Katja, thank you so much. Katja Porzykanski with us this morning, our New York City bureau chief. Again, to recapture the moment here in New York City, a shooting at the Hilton Hotel. This is on 6th Avenue below Central Park on the way to Times Square. As Paul mentioned, it is a most festive season, and that is shattered this morning. Paul, this was an investor meeting of UNH. We don't know if it was the employee meeting or a typical Wall Street conference with their leadership.
It's being reported at here by Bloomberg News as hosting an investor day, which is a very typical time for publicly traded companies to have investor days where they bring their investors and all the sell-side Wall Street analysts who cover the company, bring them together and have the management teams of the company lay out the vision for the company, what the strategy is and what their business plans are for the next several years. It's a good way for management to speak directly to their investors and analysts.
Paul Sweeney and Tom Keene here, folks, for You Worldwide. We have some wonderful guests in studio waiting patiently is Nisha Patel. She had a huge response the last time she was on. We're going to try to get to her within this breaking news. Let me tell you of the market right now. As we go to the opening, a distracted opening here in Manhattan. Futures up 19, Dow Futures up 200, a 45,000 print on Dow Futures. I don't think we'll open there, but we'll see. NASDAQ up 0.7%. And the VIX showing this great bull market, my theme into the end of the year, 13.11 on the VIX right now. Nisha's going to walk out of the studio if I don't call bonds. The 2-year yield, 4.19%. Please stay with us. Michael Barr leading our news coverage here of a shooting in Manhattan. Worldwide, this is Bloomberg Surveillance. Good morning.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And this opening bell report brought to you by JP Morgan Asset Management. Stay informed on today's fastest growing investment vehicle with a guide to ETFs. Visit jpmorgan.com/ETFs insights to learn more. All right, we have a lot of news flow ahead of the opening bell. We've been hearing about the fatal shooting of the CEO of United Health Group's insurance division. You have France's no confidence vote in about a half hour from now. Turmoil, South Korea, comments from Fed Jay Powell later this afternoon. And we can't forget that key jobs report due out Friday. Let's start with the S&P 500 up 0.3%, 19 points at 6,068. We have the Dow up 0.5%, 225 points, 44,929. The NASDAQ up 0.5%, 115 points, 19,596. We have the 2-year yield at 4.19%. That's up 1 basis point. The yield on the 10-year 4.26%, and that's up 3 basis points. To commodities, Brent crude $74 a barrel, WTI crude $70 a barrel. We have spot gold higher at $2,651 an ounce. Have to point out currency is the Bloomberg Dollar Spot Index up about 0.1%. We have the Korean won up about 0.7%. Japanese yen weaker, euro weaker. We have the British pound stronger, and Bitcoin down about 0.2%, around 95,000. That is your Bloomberg opening bell report. Paul and Tom.
Lisa, thanks so much. One more update on the shooting and the story of someone at large, a shooter perhaps at large in New York City. We welcome all of you across the nation, and particularly the tri-state area of Bloomberg 1130. We're going to get to a conversation on bonds here with the Dow up 200 points. Brian Thompson of United Healthcare, their insurance group, their health benefits group, has been fatally shot outside the Hilton Hotel. Paul, this is 6th Avenue, 53rd and 54th Street. I've seen 2 reports, as Katya mentioned, our Katya Brzezinski, our New York chief, perhaps escaping down an alley. And that's without getting into speculation and rumor, et cetera. That's about as far as we can go.
Right. This was United Healthcare Group was hosting an investor day at the hotel. Again, a big event where all their investors and their shareholders and their analysts kind of get together and meet with management. It's a typical event for a publicly traded company here. That investor day has been halted given this news, Tom.
We'll continue to follow this story this morning. As Lisa Mateo mentioned, the global stories. Folks, I'm telling you, at 2 a.m. this morning, I'm reading in on South Korea trying to catch up. And what happens is, you look at the equity market, Dow up 270 points right now, 0.6%. The answer is the big money's in bonds. Mm-hmm. You're in bonds, and you say to yourself, does this cacophony of news affect yield, affect that core thing? I need to get my money back. Joining us now, an expert on that, Nisha Patel of Parametric. We had a huge response the last time you were on about constructing individual portfolios.
Yes.
At the heart of the day, I'm not in NVIDIA. Your world is, I want to get my money back, isn't it?
Correct. Right. So on the bond side, we're really focused at Parametric on investment grade bonds. And so what's nice with bonds, as you know, is that there's a permanence and a definition of an end maturity there. Quality is going to be very important, but ultimately getting the money back. And so our clients are invested across investment grade municipal bonds, corporate bonds, treasury bonds, and then we're customizing various parameters and adding elements like tax loss harvesting as well, which we do at Parametric across fixed income and equity portfolios.
Nisha, did your view of the fixed income market change with the election we just had in the United States? Your new president looks like we're going to have a pretty solid Republican Congress as well. Did your outlook strategies change at all?
I would say the initial knee-jerk reaction in the market was obviously expected, right? Kind of that red sweep was not fully priced into the market, and so there was, I would say strategy shift just given the new administration. And look, 2025 is probably going to be such a big year in terms of taxes, tax changes, which is going to have a direct impact, right? How do you pay for this? But what's hard is right now there's still a lot of uncertainty. We talk about all these policies, you break them down, we don't really know what form they're going to come in. And as we know, just with any government policies, this all takes time in terms of implementation. So we're looking at probably a window where the impact may be more in 2026, but unfortunately, it's still going to be a little bit of a bumpy ride, I think, for bond investors in 2025.
My theme to the end of the year is a curiosity over, quote, this great bull market. How do bond people digest this great bull market? There's little talk about from Christmas of 2018, we're up 145%.
Right.
Does your world ignore that reality?
No, certainly not. And look, I think there's no doubt there's two things happening here. The recent strength in economic data, and for a while now, has been quite a surprise. And I would say that trend has still continued. So the first thing is around just monetary policy and with where neutral rate ends up, right? So the reality is that we are not going to be back in a very low rate environment. Yep. That's just not what the current economic environment is signaling. And then the second aspect is that on the bond side, though, the good news is you finally have some income that can be captured. And so we're starting to see interest from our clients twofold. You have income and fixed income. You also now have, I would say, the bond market pricing in something more realistic. Mid-September, the 10-year is closer to about a 360.
Okay.
It got too doom and gloom at that point in time, just given the economic data that we're seeing. This feels a little bit more fairly priced, given the data we've been seeing, the strength of it, and then also just what we're hearing from the Fed, right? So the Fed may go one more time this month, but they're going to really have to reevaluate what they do going forward. So the income is there, the yield cushion is there, and then more importantly, this continues to serve bonds as an important diversifier, right, given just where stock valuations are.
How about on the municipal bond front? I'm a big fan of municipal bonds. I think I'm the largest private creditor in the state of New Jersey, I feel like.
Yes.
How do they fit into a world where, I guess, I'm not sure what's going to happen to taxes. Let's just put it that way. I mean.
Yes. So, look, if we stick with the knowns, tax rates are not necessarily going down anytime for the foreseeable future. There's a possibility that maybe there's an extension of the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, in which case tax rates stay status quo. There's a chance it doesn't get extended, in which case tax rates go up. But just given where tax rates are, especially for higher net worth individuals in high tax states, the tax equivalent yields are still very, very attractive. So on the municipal bond side specifically, we've seen a little bit of underperformance because of just so much issuance in the market. It's a very nuanced market here. So we're looking at decade high yields to where, again, when we're talking about locking in income for a period of time, this is starting to get very attractive, especially when money market fund rates might have a probability of coming down.
People are beyond curious about what Parametric does. How much money do I need? I mean, if you want to buy NVIDIA, if you're triple leveraged all cash, you can slide right into triple leveraged NVIDIA, no problem.
No problem.
How much money do you need to actually construct a bond portfolio?
We can go down as low as 100,000.
So you'll buy 10 bonds of 10,000 each?
We'll buy 10 bonds of each, and that depends, right? We can create treasury portfolios as well, in which case you can buy lower increments, same with corporate bonds. But in municipal bonds, simply put, you could buy 10 bond increments across the portfolio.
So just to make a number up, there's some big hitter out there for us. Thank you for your support of Bloomberg Surveillance. They got 2.x million.
Yes.
You're going to put them in investment grade.
Correct.
Can you buy those bonds cheaper, or are you battling BlackRock to buy those bonds at a better price?
So any professional manager is certainly going to have the power of institutional buying power, right? That's one of the nuances in the municipal bond market.
You have that power.
We do. We have that power.
How?
So it's going to be about size, and it's going to be about access to the market. We see every single new issue deal in the market because we work with every single underwriter and broker dealer.
So if Apple comes out with a new issue
Right.
and the market goes mental, you can get me 42 bonds?
We can possibly get you 42 bonds. Now, we also want to make sure that's appropriately priced, right? We may not see value there. We may want to buy something else. The municipal bond market is even more nuanced to where every single geo credit, local credit, the issuance is going to vary. So you cannot go out and buy, Paul, a New Jersey bond anytime you want to, but you want to make sure you're going to be seeing everything out there possible. So the power of just a professional manager means that you're going to see a lot more out there relative to being a smaller individual investor.
Well, in the investment grade market, the new issuance, I think September was a record month, for example. Now, I'm not sure it's stopped here. How does new issuance play into your portfolio? Are you always looking for new issues? And is that something that, are you one of the phone calls that a Morgan Stanley salesman would make?
Yes. So new issue, especially when there's heavy periods of new issue deals, that is something that we would want to heavily participate in. But what you want to be doing is toggling between the issue and secondary, right? So if you do see perhaps a messy market in the secondary, you see an opportunity to buy certain bonds on the cheap, that's what you also want to be leveraging. So it's not always going to be new issue all the time, but the ability to toggle between both is going to be very, very important. So the first part is going to be credit, but the second is just going to be how you're buying these bonds and across which markets.
How much credit risk are you taking these days? Because, boy, I can sit in a 2-year treasury and get 4.2%. I'm not sure I want to go too far out. How do you guys think about that?
Yeah, so credit, look, we're trafficking in investment grade bonds. So the first part of our process is going to be internal credit oversight, both on the IG corporate side and within municipal bonds as well. So these are going to be high quality portfolios. At the end of the day, these clients are viewing this as they're more conservative, higher quality sleeve. So that's something that we're always going to be looking ahead of.
I got to cut you off because we got a very busy gentleman in Manhattan. Can you come back before Christmas? Please.
I can look to do that.
Nisha Patel will look to do that.
Thank you so much for having me.
Nisha Patel, you're a trooper. Thanks so much. With Parametric there, huge interest in this. This is an important conversation really across this nation. There's the FaceTime of cable TV and all, and of course Mayor Adams dominant within the visibility of government. In New York City, as across this nation, and we have 51 council members, Keith Powers is what you want. And I say that because he was ranked first among the 51 council members by city and state as a top lawmaker a number of years ago. Mr. Powers has a 4th district of the New York City Council, which stretches from near the Hilton Hotel, where the shooting was this morning, up to the reservoir, and Keith Powers joins us this morning. Keith, what will you expect from the New York Police Department in the coming hours?
We're certainly expecting more information about what happened here in a very horrific incident. We have heard early reports that this was a targeted attack and that the shooter had been waiting for this individual, sadly the victim, to show up. That's what we've been hearing. There was an investor conference, I believe, today that was taking place, and this individual was waiting outside. That's what we've heard so far from the police. We want, of course, a suspect. We want an arrest. We want, of course, more information to make sure New Yorkers know they're going to be safe.
In the election, Keith Powers, they do blue arrows and red arrows about the changing tone of any city in America. Across the 5 boroughs, maybe with the exception, as a generalization, folks, of the Upper West Side, this city swung in a direction towards Trump. Was that because of crime? And can you, from the 4th district of the city council, report on improving and improving crime situation in New York?
Absolutely. I think part of the swing that we're seeing in certain areas, it's not all related to public safety and quality of life, but I think there are real concerns in the city about exactly what's taking place when it comes to public safety and quality of life. And that can be anything. That can be the everyday nuisances to serious major crime incidents that are happening. I think people are particularly concerned around random incidents of crime. This one was a targeted incident, and mental health and the state of the mental health system. and people should be asking tough questions right now. We saw the three murders a couple of weeks ago at the hands of one individual who had a mental health issue.
Yeah.
This is different than that. This is seems to be somebody with a more personal grievance here and a very unfortunate, sad incident. But altogether, people package those things together and ask about exactly what's happening. And across the board, crime is in a place that in most categories that's pretty good, but there are areas that we have to be concerned about. In places like Midtown, you want to be safe from random attacks, you want to be able to walk down the street unobstructed, and New Yorkers deserve that, and we owe it to them.
Keith, tell us about Midtown Manhattan. For those of our listeners and viewers that don't get to New York City frequently, talk to us about Midtown Manhattan, particularly this time of year.
Well, I mean, a couple things about Midtown. One is we are obviously going through the holiday surge and boost right now, where people are coming in from all over the world, all over the region, to see the tree, which is lighting up tonight, to see all the tourist destinations, to go to Fifth Avenue. But the other side of that is what's happening. We're seeing a little bit of a resurgence when it comes to office space and people coming back to Midtown. We're seeing office conversions taking place right now to create residential opportunities in offices that aren't occupied or filled in the same way. But at the ground level, people are asking questions about exactly enforcement of laws, making sure we're tackling quality of life concerns, making sure that we're attending to the needs here of the streetscape, because we want to get more people into Midtown at all times. Our tourism sector, our Midtown office sector are huge parts of our economy.
Keith Powers, part of the tone of Keith Powers' politics is, I believe I can say this, in the Democratic Party. There's 14 Republicans, Paul, in New York City. But within that, Keith, you've shifted somewhat to the center over the years. We have here, as in any major city across this nation, a debate about police department leadership. Jessica Tisch is a known commodity. Please describe the triangulation of Keith Powers' day-to-day work with Mayor Adams over to Police Commissioner Jessica Tisch.
Absolutely. Well, look, I always do what I think is the right thing to do and would listen to my constituents. And you have to be responsive and be on the ground as a city council member to talk to your constituents and address the things they call you about. And what I'm hearing a lot from folks right now is illegal cannabis stores opening up, concern about random crime that's taking place, mental health issues, and those are real. And so being responsive to those is part of our job. Jessica Tisch was a sanitation commissioner. She was, in my eyes, a great commissioner. She was innovative, had big ideas, but also had a team on the ground that was extremely responsive. You would call their office, you would get a response and a reaction to any issue in your district within a matter of minutes. So I like that responsiveness. I like that style of leadership. And we need strong and responsive leadership right now to address all these issues. We have a great city. People want to be here, but we deserve that when they come here the first time, they want to come back for the second time. That means they have a good experience. I like Commissioner Tisch a lot. I like the appointment. And alongside Mayor Adams, I think there is a large focus on public safety, on gun safety, on keeping people safe. And I'm aligned with the notion that right now, places like Midtown, we have to do more to tackle those issues.
One final question, Keith Powers. Speak across this nation as we do on Bloomberg Radio, and we of course should state, folks, that Michael Bloomberg of Bloomberg LP, of course, is the owner of Bloomberg Radio. At the margin, Keith Powers, you're in the trenches. How do we get better? I don't want some big Washington tone. I want in the trenches, Keith Powers. How do we get better at gun safety in New York, in Chicago, in Phoenix?
Look, enforcement. So having we had repealed a few years ago the actual policing units that get guns off the streets. We put that back in place. That is one tangible way to get illegal guns off the streets, and we take thousands off the streets when we investigate and actually uncover and recover guns. Two is going to just be better protection against trafficking illegal guns into the city. We do need our neighboring states to help out with that, but ensuring that we have tough enforcement, trying to make sure we can prevent and investigate in other places guns that are coming into the city. We also, a couple years ago, sped up our investigations process in my district at a facility here that does all the fingerprinting and all the forensics. we're moving much quicker to be able to identify who the suspects are and to go out and investigate them. Look, we need patrol on the streets to actually catch incidents before they become the worst case scenario. So it's a little bit of everything. But I can't not talk about the national crisis around gun control, but specifically in New York, the Supreme Court. We lost in the Supreme Court a test of our own gun laws here, which now makes it a lot more easier to carry a gun around in the streets of New York City. That's damaging to our safety here in the city as well.
Keith Powers, thank you so much. The 4th District of the New York City Council, 51 members of that council. Mr. Powers from adjacent east of the Hilton Hotel, up north, up the Upper East Side to a reservoir. Nice to get him in a hellaciously busy morning. A shooting at the Hilton Hotel in Midtown Manhattan. The Dow up 251 points. A Bloomberg Business Flash and News. Our Lisa Mateo.
And we've got a rally in some of the world's largest tech companies driving stocks higher. This is just hours before words from Fed Jay Powell. Shares of Salesforce opening the trading day up at 11%. Right now, those shares up about 9%. But that 11% was the biggest one-day gain since March of 2023. Shares of Marvel Technology also higher, up about 18%. And that's also boosting hopes that it's going to keep benefiting from that AI boom. To stocks we go. The S&P 500 on pace to notch its 56th closing record this year. Right now, the S&P 500 up 0.3%, 18 points at 6,068. We have the Dow up 0.5%, 232 points, and the Nasdaq up 0.7%, around 136 points. The 2-year yield 4.15%, little change, and the yield on the 10-year 4.26%, up 3 basis points. That is your Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Paul.
Lisa, thanks so much. Greatly appreciate it. A crazy day here. We're going to, huge news flow. Thank you, Caroline Conan out of Paris earlier. Paul Sweeney and Tom Keene. 4 precious minutes here to speak about the realities of investment. Bowen Haynes in Florida has all sorts of abilities, and one of them is a more conservative path. Joining us this morning is Jay Bowen here. Too short a visit. You are basically not taking in the alternative investment Kool-Aid. To me, this is a story for next year. Where's private equity? Where's private credit going to be 24 months, 36 months from now?
Yeah, with our approach, it's somewhat, we say that we're unconventionally conventional with our largest client, the Tampa Fire and Police Fund. We just started our 51st year. We've never owned private equity or private, or the latest, whatever the latest.
So you got a 50% position in Mag 7?
Now, I will say this, which is important. One of our largest holdings, and we decided this several years ago, you can play these markets in the public markets. One of our largest holdings is Blackstone, which is as you know, the largest private equity firm in the world. So we can play these markets in a very efficient, liquid way, including real estate also, without having to go into the more risky corners of those areas.
Tom, as you can probably tell from Jay's accent, University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. That is really bothersome.
This is Merry Christmas, Paul.
Yeah, exactly. Another Carolina guy coming in here.
Oh, boy.
Jay, talk to us about your work with the Tampa Firefighters and Police. You managed a pensions fund for 50 years?
Correct. My father forged the relationship in 1974. The firm was founded in North Carolina. We were in Atlanta forever. Now we're caught the COVID wave and in the Jacksonville area. And yeah, it's just a very high quality, long-term approach, and it's proven to be, the model is proven to be quite successful, and every year that goes by, we're able to show another set of 20-year rolling data, which they
so
really
what do you do? That's short term around here. Yeah. What are you doing on a 20-year roll? Are you doing a 60-40 split? What is the pixie dust you're doing, like to beat SPX? Is that the goal?
We are certainly oriented towards equities and common stocks specifically. Typically, we're allowed to invest 65% of the portfolio in common stocks on a cost basis, not on a market value basis. Okay. So in a bull market, that's going to move up closer to 70, 75 maybe. Yeah. And the balance is, the bond side of the portfolio is strictly for income and stability. We don't trade the bonds.
Wait, I got to interrupt. You're running a defined benefit program for a public sector pension fund, and you're popping 65, 70, 75% equities?
Correct, and we've been the sole manager for 50 years, and according to all the public fund
Are
databases...
you the number one performing defined benefit program in the country?
That's what they say for 1 year through 50 years. So if you believe the database...
What have you done since December of 2018? Our theme to the end of the year here is this great bull market. What are you up from Christmas Eve 2018? Has you got that number in your head?
I don't have that number in my head.
You didn't expect this,
I've got the 31 separate 20-year rolling increments in my head. But
what's a type of stock you guys like to own? Do you have a technology bent? Are you owning corporates, financials? How do you guys allocate?
It's top down and thematic. We're trying to get ahead of these trends. Well, currently one of our big trends, we like finding these. We call them technology companies disguised as industrial companies. Companies like Eaton and Corning and Teledyne. You might think, oh, wow, these are somewhat Honeywell. They might be industrial, but they're very sophisticated from a technology standpoint. They're helping electrify and digitize the industrial base. There's a lot of demand and massive tailwinds in that area that we see going forward.
Do you guys have a value? Let me actually put it to you this. What is your valuation criteria? How do you think about valuation? Because you could look at some of these names, whether they're Mag 7 or just some other technology names, and really have to have some gumption here to buy some of these things. How do you think about valuation?
Correct, and that has really changed over particularly the last 15 years or so, where it's a much more dynamic type of approach. We've always looked ahead. We're not really that concerned with current earnings.
Okay.
With our long-term approach, we have the luxury, and they've given us, the board down there has given us the luxury of really looking out. So a company that might look expensive on a current basis, if we look out and feel like the tailwinds are there and the trends are there, we're willing to pay up a little bit for it.
Tell me about Florida. I mean, I make jokes about it, but it's not funny. Tampa's stadium was destroyed. They're going to play in the Yankees Springs Training Park, I guess. There are hurricanes in the Florida economy. Where is it all 2 years from now? I mean, are we done building 6,000 square foot houses on the water that get blown over?
I think that trend is going to be curtailed somewhat because of the insurance situation down there, which is changing as we speak.
Yeah.
But it's still a high growth market state from a economic policy standpoint. Is I think going to continue to attract. But I think that certainly it's going to moderate.
You got to come back. I mean, I can't tell you folks how unusual this conversation is with Jay Bowen, but I just want to know. I mean, I'm certain every meal you've ever taken with the Tampa Union has been at Bern's Steakhouse. Are you eating in the bar, or do you go into one of the back rooms when you're at Bern's Steakhouse?
I never get to eat because the wine list is in a phone book.
Have you been in the basement?
I get lost in that phone book, and then it's time to go.
Have they ever taken you downstairs to the wine cellar of Bern's Steakhouse, Tampa, Florida?
Yeah, but they maybe put a blindfold on and promise not to tell anybody.
They took me down there once, Paul. It's like acres.
Right.
It's unreal. I eat in the bar.
Man, it's something
I try
else.
to eat right directly across from the bar. And I get better service there, I think. But it's great.
It's something.
Is it written into the Bowen-Haynes agreement that you only can dine at Bern's Steakhouse in Tampa?
You've given me the idea of the day. There you go.
I think Paul, it says road trip, team surveillance.
I know exactly where Bern's
Tampa Bay, we'll talk to the firefighters. Jay Bowen, thank you so much on a really exceptional day here for news, geopolitics, international relations, equities, bonds, currencies, commodities, and the courage to own equities in a pension fund. With Bowen-Haynes, Jay Bowen with us at Florida this morning. We need to recap the news, which will transfix New York City through the day. The press conference, as Paul mentioned, will give us an update. But most importantly, I believe I can say at this moment, a suspect is at large in a shooting in Midtown Manhattan. Brian Thompson of United Healthcare, UNH. He's a president of one of their subgroups, a unit, if you will, of UNH. At age 50, he is dead. A shooting at the Hilton Hotel on 6th Avenue in Manhattan. We've heard from our Shelley Banjo from our New York City Bureau Chief Katja Brzezinski, all of our city team on this story, and again, waiting for news. But the critical issue for those of Bloomberg 1130 in New York is a suspect is at large. We'll have much more on this. We'll have to see on that. Alex Steele and Paul Sweeney will drive this conversation forward, and with it, the markets. Paul, if we can just pause for a moment. When does the market pull back? Can you send me a memo?
Yeah, boy, when I see that, I'll let you know here.
2 a.m, futures are negative, except the Nasdaq's green. What's that about?
What's that about exactly? So we've seen, certainly a risk-on posture here, Tom. I would call it, since the election, we've seen that. Whether you want to look at the stock market, the bond market, or heck, even cryptocurrencies. Bitcoin is sitting here at $96,000. It gives you a sense that the animal spirits, for lack of a better word, from the marketplace are alive and well right here.
Dow up 241 points, 0.5%. NASDAQ leads the way, up 0.6%. Let me give you the levels: 44,944 on the Dow, 6,067. SPX up 0.3%. NASDAQ 100, 21,361. The VIX, I'm going to get a 12 print, folks. I'm not there right now, but I have a VIX of 13.05, our theme to the end of the year, this great bull market. Thanks to our team today, particularly Eric, for lining up our coverage of this tragic shooting in New York. We'll have more on Bloomberg Radio.